please rise. December 14th, 2022 session of Howard County Council session.
Morning, please be seated. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located in Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge the shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? Councillor Fury, Councillor Carter.
Moved by Councillor Fury, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that the December 14th, 2022 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of November 9th, 22nd, and 23rd? Councillor McKechnie, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the minutes from the following meetings of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a report on video surveillance systems for Public Works. Morning, Mr. March.
Morning. I'm presenting this report on behalf of the Public Works Department. So if you recall, a report came to County Council last month recommending video surveillance systems for the 3 public works yards. During the conversations about the surveillance systems, it was recommended to extend the retention time on the video surveillance from 7 days to 30 days. So I had to bring a report forward now because in the policy, it states that the maximum for video retention would be 7 days. So if we were going to go beyond that, we would need a policy exception from County Council. So that's what the request coming forward to you today is, to extend that from 7 days, to make an exception for these installations from 7 days to 30 days. As well as a note, the extra storage space will extend the price from the budgeted $14,000 to $15,000 for the 3 systems. And as noted in report, there was $25,000 set aside for this project.
And it's probably worth the extra money just to have that extra time to check it out. Are there any comments or questions on that? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warden, through to Mike. And it's probably not the question for now, but is there any way that we can partner with the county to maybe do some of our at the lower tier buildings?
Yeah, I've been talking to, I've talked to your CAOs and different department heads for anybody who's come forward requesting video surveillance, and we try to standardize on a solution that that IT recommends that meets the policy requirements. Does Highlands East have any projects that you're aware of, or should I just touch base with the CAO to see what's on tap?
Lately, there's probably quite a few incidents, I'll put it that way, and it's probably best to talk to the CAO.
Okay, so I'll reach out to the CAO and ask her if we can help in any way with video surveillance installations.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve the request? Councillor Carter, Councillor Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the December 14th, 2022 report on video surveillance systems for public works yards. That Haliburton County Council approved the revised cost of $15,000 for the 3 surveillance systems. And finally, that Haliburton County Council approved the exemption to policy IT 05 video surveillance policy to allow for 30 days of video surveillance storage at each of these locations.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So we have no delegations today. Next on the agenda is a closed session to talk about paramedic service master plan. But could I have a mover and a seconder to go into close? Councillor Dayu, Councillor Carter.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that Halliburton County Council enter into closed session for the following reasons: a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on behalf of the municipality or local board.
All in favor? That's carried. Welcome back to the open session. There is no specific report from closed. No reports or recommendations from committee of the whole. No reports and recommendations from joint accessibility. Although we have did do some very successful interviews for members of the accessibility committee and found we've got some good members to bring forward. So next up is planning and environment and the status update on the shoreline preservation bylaw. And we would look for Mr. Stone. Just a couple of comments. I mean, you're all aware that there's been an awful lot of work over the last term on the shoreline preservation bylaw. And, you know, I would say that there were concessions made by everyone on county council in order for us to land on a final document that the document itself was unanimously accepted by council. I think the majority of council was hoping that we would have a chance to put this document to the test to clearly determine what shortcomings there are, if there are some, because you know, there's been things that have been pointed out as shortcomings, and to me, we need to test that document to really find out. So the next step that we took was to seek approval from the municipalities to move forward with implementation. But with the new council, we're now looking to just reaffirm the direction that we're taking. It's my understanding that so far, although we would hope to have buy-in from everybody, we only have 3 of the 4 municipalities who have agreed to participate so far. And so one of the items that we have here is a report from the lawyer that just outlines a path forward for us should we not all participate. But I will over to you, Steve. I know that you've got a good report here for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the rest of council. The warden is correct. The shoreline bylaw was exhaustively researched by 2 consultants, providing that advice to the previous council. And what you'll see in the staff report is really certainly in the background is the history of the development of the shoreline bylaw as it's written today. The first attachment is the actual bylaw itself. It's quite detailed and many pages long. And but you'll see by the second attachment, which was the very first legal opinion that the previous county council sought out. It provided the basis for the county to actually to investigate a new bylaw through the powers that are given to both local municipalities and county council through the Municipal Act. And then ultimately, there's a final legal opinion that was sort of after we had got to the point where we did with the presentations of the new bylaw to the lower tier councils. We sought a legal opinion, and that legal opinion, the lawyer was right in saying that it's a very well crafted bylaw, and something that certainly the previous council could put their faith in, and similarly with the this new council, they can do the same, should you choose to do so. With regards to, I'll just do a very quick presentation for the benefit of all. And this is very similar to the presentations I made to the lower tier councils in September. And as I said, the legislation that gives the basis for creating this bylaw is in sections 138 and 142 of the Municipal Act. So 138 deals with tree preservation and 142 deals with site alteration. The benefits of this new bylaw is it now covers both the preservation of trees along the shoreline as well as the terrain close to the water's edge. So I refer to that as terrestrial or topography of the existing shoreline. As mentioned in the staff report, it was approved by the previous council on August 24th. And there was a caveat to that approval that it would come into effect April 1st, 2023. Now, again, what we're seeking today is really to ask County Council to consider whether it wants to move forward with that. Do you actually like the bylaw the way it's crafted? So with regards to the actual bylaw itself, section 1 of it deals with a whole host of definitions. And in terms of the terms are actually defined or at least highlighted throughout the bylaw for easy reference. And the most critical definitions would be that of the shoreline as well as the prohibited area. So those are laid out in the first section. And the bylaw really is to assist property owners with compliance. There was a lot of discussion throughout the development of the bylaw, whether or not we could actually create a bylaw that was easy to understand and allow for the individual property owners to analyze it themselves, figure out what they were actually doing with their shoreline, and provide them with a suite of exemptions to assist them in furthering preserving their shoreline in a way that they felt was sustainable. Section 3 of the bylaw deals with the area of application of the bylaw. And there was much discussion over the bylaw's development about the science behind picking a certain buffer area. And initially, through that discussion, the consultants did recommend 30-meter buffer. And that's consistent with the policy that exists in the county official plan, as well as the lower tier municipal plans. But after much discussion, and as the warden pointed out, the previous council decided they would opt for a smaller buffer, and that being 20 meters. And that's measured from the high water mark on the shoreline. The bylaw also includes prohibited lands, and that deals with provincially significant wetlands, for example, but also deals with municipally owned property. And in the lower tier municipalities, that's typically your shoreline, shore road allowances, as well as any sort of crown lands. Another part of the discussion that trended towards the end of the discussion on this bylaw was the inclusion of wetlands. So it is now included and so in addition to the shorelines, which was the previous tree preservation bylaw, it now includes a 20-meter buffer around wetlands within the county. This bylaw does not apply to the harvesting of trees in the county. That's covered by an existing tree harvest bylaw. In terms of prohibitions, there's 3 of them. And it says site alteration. The bylaw says site alteration, which now includes blasting, filling, and grading, is not allowed without a shoreline permit. Removal of natural vegetation is not allowed without a shoreline permit. And removal of a stump from a steep slope is not allowed. Now, I say that because there are exceptions to those prohibitions. And that's one thing that the previous council wanted to make very clear in the bylaw was a list of common exemptions, as I call it. And primarily that allows for minor landscaping. And this is a critical one. Maintenance and replacement of existing features such as retaining walls. So many of our properties along the shoreline do actually have retaining walls at the water's edge. And so you're allowed to replace those. Removal of 25% of the natural vegetation. The previous tree preservation bylaw had a very similar approach, and that was to allow for what we call windows or opportunities to view the lake setting. And that was carried over into the new bylaw. You're still allowed to prune and remove hazard trees. And this is a really good one for the property owners in the county. And it's activities that are associated with a building permit. So if a property owner decides they want to, say, add an addition to their cottage and it's within 20 meters of the shoreline, if they can go get a building permit for that, they are now exempt from getting a shoreline permit. And that's really critical for those who want to keep developing their properties. Another key one would be allowing for access down to the water line. So if you have a naturally occurring shoreline and there's nothing there at the moment, you're allowed to create a 5-meter access down to the water. And that's fairly large when you think of municipal roads, they're about 6 meters and so on. So it's a good size access down to the water. Now in section 6, that sort of details how shoreline permits come into play. And so say, for example, you wanted to construct a 10-meter access down to the water because you wanted a bigger access. Well, that would not be exempt under this bylaw. So you'd have to apply to the county for a shoreline permit. It's not to say it just initiates an action that the property owner has to do. So in terms of the shoreline permit process, the bylaw envisions that it will be the county, primarily the planning department at the county, to administer that. Like all sort of planning applications and inquiries about land use and so on and so forth, both the lower tiers and the county encourage and participate widely in pre-consultation. So that will be another thing that will be critical to the success of implementing this bylaws, for members of the public to feel free to actually make contact with the planning department and discuss what their projects are. And I'll tell you now, I prefer the reference to build to the bylaw. And so what I will do and our staff do now is to encourage how we can help people understand the bylaw, and so they don't have to go through a permit process. At this point, it's envisioned that fees for shoreline permit will be $100. Say, for example, you happen to undertake work and it's discovered after those works are done and it didn't, you actually needed a permit. There will be a fee of $500 to play some catch up with regards to that. The review process is 30 days for us to go from submission of the application to making a decision, preferably issuing a permit within 30 days. But our best practices would be 10 business days. So hopefully, and as I envision this, we would have our discussion consultation with the property owner, and we use that first 5 days to vet the project, and then we'll use our last 5 days or the second set of days to actually do our inspections and then issue the permit. So that's what I envision as best practice in terms of implementing it. The good thing for shoreline permits is that it allows for, once it's issued, it's good for 3 years. So even late in the season, you can get your permit and you still have 2 full summers for its implementation. Now, on the off chance that planning department staff cannot review the application within the 30 days, or we're in a different, we go in a different direction in terms of what we think is acceptable to issue a permit, or sorry, a shoreline permit. The applicant is allowed to, if you want to say, appeal the non-decision, that would be taking more than 30 days, or a decision not to approve, they can appeal that to county council. Now, there are provisions within the bylaw that allow county council to actually create a committee, much like you've done with the land division committee. You can appoint actually members of councils to that if you don't want the full council to deal with it. So it could be 2 or 3, 4 individuals from council to sit on that sort of a review panel committee, or you can actually go through a similar process and appoint members of the public to that committee. So it's from that perspective, it's wide open for county council to make a decision there. Now, section 10 of the bylaw, and there's been a lot of discussion about offenses and penalties. And I will start by saying what we're hoping for, and I've always done this with the shoreline bylaws that I was implementing at Seguin Township when I was there. We always approach things in terms of offenses and penalties with the effort to bring the offense into compliance. So, for example, we would have often would have extensive filling and tree cutting on the shoreline, and what we would try to do, instead of going laying information or summons to court, we would actually work at trying to come up with a rehabilitation plan and have that implemented to restore the shore. So in some cases, we'd get agreement and then truly get it at an agreement with them to actually remove the fill and then re-landscape them. And then that's the preferred approach when we're dealing with offenses. Offenses are also complaint driven. Right now, our foresters investigating 2 offenses that we received from the community. And that's what we expect with this bylaw. It's not that we as staff, we will not be out there proactively trying to discover violations. It would be a complaint-driven exercise. We'll, as it's laid out right now, in terms of the vision, we'll have 2 compliance officers. I don't like the words bylaw enforcement. I prefer the language, a more positive, more work with your neighbor approach, and that's why I'm referring to them as compliance officers. And they'll actually double as plans review people, is the vision that I have for them. And so that means they'll be up front and at the end of all the processing that we do. So they will review the plans and they'll issue the permits, and then they'll do their inspections. But when it comes to offenses, the compliance officers, I mean, the first thing that they will try to do is bring them the offense into compliance. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is actually just to issue a permit. If it's not a significant occurrence, and I mentioned about the 5-meter access way, if they happen to build a 10-meter one, what we could do after the investigation, if there's no real harm to the environment, we would issue a permit to allow for the 10-meter access. Another big thing or a component that would be on the compliance request approach. But we also, I mentioned about having orders to rehabilitate. That was a common thing that I've used in the past. And it's usually a fruitful discussion with the property owner. And ultimately, you get their agreement. And the works will happen over time, but that's a very successful way to ensure the shoreline is preserved and rehabilitated. Should we end up in court, we're subject to the provincial offenses part 3, which is a summons to court. So we would do our investigation, we would lay that information, get the court's approval to have a court date, and then we would be subject to the provincial fines. And for example, if you're found guilty, and it is always up to $50,000 for your first offense. my experience in the court system is that you seldom get the 50,000. You have to educate the judges in order to get decent fines levied for that. But also through the court system, you can actually get court orders for rehabilitation, and that's a really strong benefit of going to court, because if the court orders and you don't do it, then you're in contempt of court. And that concludes what I've done in terms of my presentation. I know the report is quite full in terms of the various attachments, and I've tried to lay the attachments out as best as I could, sort of to flow through from the bylaw right down to, as I mentioned about the bylaw compliance officials, and would be happy to, if you would allow me, be happy to actually go through them step by step. So
I just wanted to ask, do council members wish to go through each one of the attachments to the bylaw individually, step by step? I think the one thing that we maybe would like to speak to is the with respect to the delegation of authority, and maybe you could speak to what we can do should not all 4 municipalities choose to delegate authority.
sure.
What we can or can't do, I mean, one way or the other.
Oh, well, thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. And what we tried to do is sort of lay that out in the report, and that's why one of the attachments is from the county solicitor, and that's his opinion is actually found in attachment 3, if I've labeled it right.
Yep.
So should there is a mechanism, or at least a process, shall I say, if to move forward if there's only 3 out of the 4 municipalities who want to implement the bylaw. So given the way the bylaw is structured right now, it would require it to be repealed and a new bylaw crafted that actually refers to the 3 participating municipalities. And there would be what we would do is we'd also add a schedule to the bylaw that actually delineates by map the areas that this bylaw regulates. It would, most likely would require staff again to go back to those 3 municipalities, because we would have a county council would have to enact a new bylaw with the specific references to the 3 municipalities. And then staff would have to go back to those councils and make the presentation again, asking for them to accept that changed bylaw. And then again, delegate authority for the county to implement that. Now, they're also in the real tricky side of this, and I'm not sure, I myself would have to do a fair bit of discussion with the CEO, but there would also have to be investigation into how best to fund that implementation model. And at this point, although we do know how the bylaw would be worded, we just don't know how it would be implemented from a financial model. So.
Okay, questions, comments at this juncture? Councillor Royale.
Steve, thanks very much for the for what you've said. It pretty well sums up everything. And I know in my particular case, I had challenges in the previous council with some of the issues, and those have not gone away. Having said that, I think that it's too early to deal with any of them. My concerns were then and are now related to your attachments 4, 5, 6, 8, which would then lead to 14. And I'm looking forward to what you're going to be able to present to us between today and April 1st. So I'm not demanding anything of you today but I am looking forward to getting better clarity on those attachments, which would be 4, 5, 6, 8, and then that would lead to 14.
So 4.
And then that would lead to 14.
Well, get right on that.
We don't have enough reports to write. Other questions or comments? Okay, if we, I'm not quite sure whether we just receive your report or whether we accept to move forward as originally planned. And wait and see what we get with buy-in or not from the fourth municipality. I'm just a bit of a loss as to where to go here. Councillor Carter.
So from my perspective, we either stand united or we fall divided. It doesn't take a master cartographer to figure out that every major lake and water system in Dysart flows through Minden after it leaves Dysart. So, if at this point in time, Dysart in particular is not going to go along with this this bylaw, I'm not sure what its total value is. This work started on this well before the previous council even came into existence. We have, staff put together a very good bylaw, I thought, which was initially rejected, and council at the time decided to go out and hire consultants, multiple consultants. The consultants, I guess, gave advice on how to craft a bylaw, which they did, and it seems that the lawyers seemed to like the way it was crafted. And then the other side of it was the scientists who went out and looked at every report that was out there, showed that the science supported what we're trying to do. I respect individual rights, but our country was founded on the common good. You have the right to drive, but you don't have the right to drive drunk. You have the right to hunt, but you don't have the right to, take deer at any time of the season. You have the right to fish, but there's a limit to the number of fish you can catch. You have rights, but there are limits if we want to have a society and a country in which it's worth living in. You can't buy a piece of property and then decide you're going to drill for oil and or put in a gravel pit next to your neighbor. So there are always limits on rights so that we can have the common good. It's very disappointing when this situation here, in particular in Haliburton County, is that our environment is our livelihood. The very reason why we have an economy and we have people who want to come here is because of our environment. Anything we do that affects that environment affects the need for, or the desire for people to come here. And we won't have a housing problem if we don't have clean lakes. Nobody will want to come here. Nobody will want to live here. There'll be no need to have employees to service the tourists that are coming here. So it is of paramount and prime importance. And not only that, we have a moral issue to be the stewards of these lakes. People who have come here for 80 years or more as cottagers and have seen their children, enjoy the lakes. And now those children are watching their children. And, the whole idea of doing something that will enable your grandchildren to have the same enjoyment that you did is, I don't know, it's of tremendous importance to me and in my feelings on life. You know, I think that we have had, you know, every survey that has been done has shown the support for the need to do something, to do this. I think we have lived with a minority group that has had undue voice and influence on many people, that has stalled this legislation, and it has gone out to threaten and intimidate people who may support it. So I guess what I'm trying to say right now is that we have to find a way to come together on this issue. I don't think that we're going to be able to do it today. You know, I would like to defer this into the January meeting so that each of our new councils has the opportunity to talk about it locally and find out, you know, how we can do this together. But if we don't do it together, there is not much use in doing anything.
Well, I thank you for your comments, and I agree with a lot of what you said, particularly when it comes to our economy, what we're all about, being good stewards of our lakes and water, the legacy that we leave our grandchildren. You know, if our kids can't, I don't have kids, but if people's children can't swim in the lakes, you know, a decade from now, we're lost. I do disagree with you with respect if it's, I would love for us to be all in. I think it's important that we're all in on this. I really do. But I don't agree that if it's all or nothing. Because even if it's 3 of the 4 municipalities that go forward, we're at least making positive strides in the right direction. It's not going to be perfect, that's for sure. But there will be positive strides. And I do believe that we need to have an opportunity to see how this works. And we won't know for sure how it's going to work unless we put it to the test. Councillor Dayu, then Councillor Rael.
I fully agree with Councillor Carter's position when it comes to the importance of this legislation. And I fully agree with Warden Danielson on the need to work toward whatever we can reach in the possible eventuality that one of our lower tier municipalities does not come on board at this stage. My inclination would be, let us go through the process of creating a structure that would work for 3 out of the 4 lower tier municipalities for maybe 2 years, collect as much data as we can over those 2 years in terms of outcomes, both positive and negative, and how the process worked, how streamlined it was. Let's really put in a concrete effort into gathering that sort of evidence to see whether after a year or 2 fears could be allayed or new fears risen, or or whatever other adaptations we might wish to make to the legislation at that time. So I would very much be in favor of continuing with the bylaw with 3 municipalities in the eventuality that one chooses not to participate yet.
Councillor Rael.
Yeah, I have a completely different opinion with regards to participation. I think if you participate, you participate. If you don't, you don't. And that's a choice you make. My concern was more related to the people that we represent. And of the people that we represent, the majority of them were interested in having a bylaw, specifically the one that's documented here. Of the group who did not support the bylaw, many of them did not support it because they didn't know how it was going to work. That's the reason why they did not support it, because they looked at the sheer amount of bureaucracy they thought was going to be involved. And that's why I've asked for the attachments that I've spelled out to have better definition. And the reason why I'm saying that is because now I want to go back to that 20% or whatever number of people that did not support this thing in the first place and look at the arguments that they're presenting for why they did not support it. And as to whether or not all 4 or 3 municipalities are involved, that's an individual decision. I think the overall bylaw is the right thing to do. but each will have to make his own decision. And I strongly, strongly hope that Mr. Stone will continue to get us to a place where we need to be.
The comments, Councillor Fury.
Well, I don't know whether my face is red or whether the top of my head's red. I'm not sure here. We're getting a little scolding here. Reality is, this is another complaint-driven bylaw. Right? Yeah, okay. So we had a tree cutting bylaw that was complaint-driven for how many years, and we didn't enforce it.
So it's being enforced to some extent.
Well, very little. Like I can tell you, there's 10,000 waterfront properties in Haliburton County. So this is so complicated to me. If we don't have and I'm quite prepared to talk about it at a future time, but why do we have to have 30 pages or whatever it is? Why can't we do a bylaw? I know you got a definition, Mr. Stone, but we need to make it simple. It's just like the cottage rental business. There's 3 or 4 things that are annoying the neighbors. Let's deal with the 3 or 4 things. Like, we go from 75 or 36, the 30-meter setback. And then you got a whole group of people signing saying, that's right. Well, it is right in agricultural lands because the fertilizer goes into the lake. And then you have somebody from the college say 25 feet is a riparian zone. There's so many conflicting things here. It depends whether you're environmentally conscious really or you're not. I would like to, I thought when I read this, when I got this agenda, that this was for information and that this would come back and we would have an opportunity to sit around the table as a council and talk about all the things that we don't like or we do like about the bylaw. So we got till April, I think, before it comes into force. So if that's not the case, clearly my council is not going to delegate authority until they're satisfied that it's a bylaw or a tool that's going to be useful. So I don't know if we can talk about it. I think it deserves a special meeting myself. I don't think you can do it in an hour or 2. But anyway, that's my thoughts.
With respect to the fact about it being a complaint-driven bylaw, I think a lot of bylaws are put into place because the majority of the public, when they know that there's a bylaw in place, will actually follow it. There doesn't need to be infractions necessarily. You're at least making some positive steps forward. It's not 100%, and there are going to always be people who are going to break the rules and do whatever the heck they want to do. And we won't be able to stop that no matter what we do, no matter how simple or detailed a document we come up with. I think that we're going to be faced with that problem.
If it were permit, it is permit. It's not permit driven, but I don't know. I just hate bylaws that force neighbors to squeal on their neighbors. If there was another way of doing it, but you can't look at 10,000 properties either. So,
well, we
it's a tough call.
looked at every aspect of this, and to me, we do need to land somewhere relatively soon if we're going to plan for an April
Yep.
startup
Okay.
date. So and I'm not. You've got 5 out of 8 people here who have gone through this bylaw in every detail and every word for word, and
I know, I watched it.
how much more we can do to if we're all in agreement with where we've landed so far. I may be wrong on my numbers, maybe it's 4, sorry. I'm not sure how much we're going to be prepared to change it at this point in time, but I don't know what other people think. So I guess we need to decide, do you want to have a special meeting and go through it, detail by detail, talk about it in general terms, or do you want to make it, just receive it for information today, or to say, we want to move forward, knowing that we're not going to get buy-in from one municipality at this point in time, or suspecting that may be the case. Councillor Shell, then Councillor McKechnie.
So a couple of things then. This is the 3rd council to see this bylaw or the creation of this bylaw. So, you could sit here every 4 years and somebody new comes on and says, well, I don't like that. but it is a bylaw. Bylaws can be repealed, bylaws can be changed, and if it's not working, then we take something out. But half of us sitting here have gone through this line by line by line for the past almost, well, becoming into the 5th year. And I personally would like to see it put into place, see how it works. And if it doesn't work, well, then we can change things later. But I don't think, you know, an extra.
Excuse me, gentlemen, somebody's speaking right now.
I don't think maybe waiting another month, if it would give the opportunity for any council that, you know, is not completely on board to go back to their councils and have the discussion. And perhaps having a special council meeting just to discuss this so that anybody who wasn't sitting at this table and not paying attention for the last 4 or 5 years can get up to speed on get their questions answered. But I'm 100% in favor of moving forward, regardless of who's on board.
Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, I'm here to represent a lot of people that are not in favor of the policy. That's the way it is. I hear so much about all these people that are in favor of it. I'm speaking of like a lot of people who are Lake Association members, but also there's a very large group of people who aren't Lake Association members who really feel that they've been, not informed of enough of these issues. So, like I have a very, very large group of people in Dysart that are not in favor of this, and I hear so often that everybody else has. I guess in your municipality, it's a different scenario, but I'm here to speak for all those people, and they feel that there's enough policies and rules in place. We just got to enforce them. And that's the message that I've been given to bring here today. And that's what I'm telling you. I could go on a lot more about a lot of points and that, and I'm not going to, but I'm here speaking for the people who are not for this. And they're not for it because they feel there's already enough rules in place. And our lakes, people are very proud of their properties. You got such a small majority of people that have clear cut or have done something really crazy at their water line. And I talked to one of the contractors. I said, when was the last time you dynamited? He said 10 years ago. So I don't. I'm not saying I'm a waterfront property owner. But the only asset my wife and I have is our property. So I know the importance of environment and taking care of it, and I do, and so do all of my neighbors. There's a small majority on Eagle and Moose Lake. You got very small number of people with clear cut. I'd love to see us just work on communicating and educating those people to plant some trees or vegetation. I'm for all that, but to spend the money that's already been spent and to create more. We're in tough times here, and like I say, I'm just speaking for a lot of my constituents in my municipality. And thanks very much.
Further comments, Councillor Rao.
Yeah, the bad news is I've been through this for 4 years, and at the end of the day, I don't disagree with anything anybody has said here today. Do I agree with every single word that's in that bylaw as it's written? No, I don't. Do I want to spend another 4 years debating that document? No, I have no interest in doing that whatsoever. And the reason I don't is because I don't know how the damn thing's going to work. Once I know how the thing's going to work and how it's going to be administered, then I can effectively go back to the base document and say, these are the areas that need to be changed. But until we get a better idea of how it's going to work, how it's going to be out in the field, and the repercussions coming from it, costs and everything else, then we're going to be spending all our time talking about a theoretical document that everybody's going to have an opinion on. And to me, that is so counterproductive. If we want to have a special meeting and we want to discuss the base document itself, fine, I'll show up, but I'm not interested in doing that. But if we want to sit down and spend part of the meeting going over how the thing is going to work, look at the challenges in making it work and see if that reflects back in the base document, I'm all on board. But I do not want to spend a whole day or whatever time it takes to merely go back through a document that we've already spent 4 years on. So I'll show up if you tell me to.
Well, it's good to hear that you'll show up for any meeting that we have, Councillor Royale. Councillor Burton, we have not heard from you.
A bit different than what my deputy or fellow councillor. I would support another meeting. If it takes a day, so be it may. I'm not too interested as C says, as far as digging the whole document out and starting right from the beginning, but I think there's some room there that we could look at a few things. And probably for me, it's more moving forward with it. But as far as the administration end of it, it has me somewhat bothered. And I thought maybe we could tie that into the meeting as well.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, just make sure that my original remarks weren't misconstrued. My idea is that we need to work towards some consensus. I want everybody in on this because I think that's what is needed for the whole county and for our future. So, I'm willing to do it any way that we can do it so that we can continue to move forward. I want to continue to move forward. I want Mr. Stone to continue to do the work that he's doing to try to get this done and enacted by April. Because unlike maybe others, I continue to see wanton destruction of our shoreline. And can give you countless numbers of examples. I too am a waterfront property owner, and my biggest asset is my waterfront property. So I'm all for trying to preserve its value and its desire. So anything that we can do, any meeting that we want to have, I don't want to go through, every aspect of the bylaw, but if we need to have discussions about how it would be interpreted, how it would be put into place, how it would be enforced, I'm all for it. And if we need a meeting to make it happen, as long as we can continue to try to work to get everybody on board.
It sounds like that might be the challenge, but I can see that, another meeting may assist in that regard. Councillor Dayu.
The bylaw has been the victim of a lot of electoral rhetoric. And I find that there is still a great deal of misinformation circulating out there.
Mhm.
And perhaps a further conversation, to Cease's point, could help us all to clarify to ground truth effectively. So if points were brought to the table, well, my constituents believe this, yeah, my constituents believe that, and of course we all have constituents who ride the full spectrum of belief, in each of our ridings. But if we had the opportunity to really clearly ground truth, some of the information that is out there, I think that could serve us all.
Councillor Shell.
To Councillor Dayu's point then, so when Councillor McKechnie says, he's representing people who are not in favor of the bylaw, if he can speak to those people, find out why don't you agree with the bylaw? Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Bring those things forward so that we know what the issue is as to why people are so opposed. And just for Brent's sake, I will say amalgamation, this would not be going on right now. That's just for Brent.
Well, and we all represent people who both are in support of and are against. I definitely, there are people in Algonquin Highlands who are not supportive of the bylaw for one reason or another, but there's an awful lot who do. And I'm sure Councillor McKechnie, you'd have to agree that there are people in your riding who do agree with it. Maybe not as many as don't, but we all have to struggle with that. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we will have another meeting in January. I guess, could we tie it to our committee of the whole meeting on the 11th? Or is that too much to ask?
It gets to be problematic with the budget, to be honest.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Where we still have the City of Kawartha Lakes to come and speak to their orientation, which will tie into their budget request, which is significant. So yeah, I'm not sure I would recommend that, but I would, but we can certainly endeavor to set up a special meeting. Typically Mondays and Fridays are the most appropriate because no local councils meet those days. But we can certainly do our best to set that up.
Okay. So we're seeking clarification primarily on some aspects of the delivery of the bylaw primarily. So if we can do our best to have set up a meeting, a special meeting at the earliest possible opportunity to do that. So that we can prepare, you know, for budget and planning, because if we are going to go ahead, we have to look at revising. If it's only three municipalities, we need to revise the bylaw to reflect that, to take it back to each individual municipality, assuming that they would go for it because they already have already. And then look at staffing, which is not something that happens overnight these days. You can in fact find staff. So for today, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councilors Carter and Dayu. Does that sound, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to add in the section about scheduling a meeting in January?
Yes, please.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the report entitled Status Update on the Shoreline Preservation Bylaw 4123, and that a special meeting be scheduled for January to review the bylaw in detail and the implementation options.
Councillor Perry?
Well, I'd just like to say that if we're coming here, I know you spent 4 years, spent a lot of money too. And I think there's some validity to it for sure. But if we're coming here just to hear how the administration's going to work, and we're not going to hear some of the maybe good alternatives to make the bylaw better, then for one, there's not much point in having a meeting.
Well, I think you've heard other members of council who wish to have some clarification on how the bylaw is going to be administered, to provide that clarification so that they can speak to their constituents who are still unsure about how things are going to work. Okay, so to the motion, all in favor? That's carried. Next, our administrative reports. There was a correspondence listing. Did anyone have any comments or questions about the correspondence or wish to support correspondence? Hearing none. Next on the agenda is a.
Did you want to pass a motion to receive that correspondence?
Oh, sorry. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence listing? Councilors McKechnie and Burton.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the correspondence listing for the period of October 17th, 2022 to December 5th, 2022 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the approval to release a request for proposal for a tandem snowplow. Good morning, Sil.
Morning. Morning, Madam Warden and members of council. Public Works staff are recommending the release of an RFP to purchase a tandem plow truck prior to the approval of the 2023 budget. This recommended purchase is according to the county's equipment replacement plan. And staff do expect some long lead times for deliveries of basically any kind of vehicles or equipment. There's still a long lag of orders and delivery for expected deliveries.
Do you have an estimated time that we're having to wait for items like snowplows?
It's hard, but it's usually a year to a year and a half.
So we may not even be talking about this upcoming year's budget to pay for it.
Correct. It could very well be delivered mid 24.
Mr. Ritter.
If I might, that would be a cash flow. We would actually utilize the funds in the 2023 budget, even if we take delivery in 2024. If we don't do that, the likelihood that we would all of a sudden there'd be a, 4 or 5 pieces of equipment all to be purchased at the same time.
We don't want to do that.
So we would set the money aside from the 23 budget and pay for it at that time. I don't think I've explained that well, but
Councillor Burton.
And we certainly have done this in the past. This isn't new.
Any, Councillor Carter.
And just, it's more of a technical points probably for the finance department. If when on these RFPs, particularly with these long lead times, I understand that many of the people that are answering are not committing to a price. Because if something is only going to be delivered in 2025, they're not going to tell you what the price is today. When we issue the RFP, are we committing to buy it? Or do we have the option to say, hey, when it comes around to our time to buy it and they give us a price, do we then have the option to say, no, we don't like that price?
Andrew, if you'd like to respond to that.
I'm not aware at this time of us.
the
Microphone, sorry. I'm not aware that we've received RFPs at this time without pricing included in them, responses. So that would be new for us if we experience that. And once we receive the results of that, we would be bringing it back to you for approval.
Sorry, I think that we have, right, in Minden, we put out an RFP and they said they can get to us by a certain date, but they would not guarantee the price.
Yeah, we haven't experienced that.
No, we've never had that happen before. They've always guaranteed a price, even though they have a long lead for a delivery.
Okay. Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve this request? Councillor Fury, Councillor Burton.
moved by Councillor Fury, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the December 14th, 2022 staff report, approval to release a request for proposal for a tandem axle snowplow, and that Haliburton County Council provide approval for staff to release a request for proposal for the acquisition of a 2023 tandem axle snowplow.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next would be Mrs. Robinson with a number of reports. First up is your check register.
Yes, our November check register totaled $1,458,365.13. All payments have been made and applied to the appropriate 2022 budget lines.
Are there any questions on the check register? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve it? Councillor Dayu and Shell.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the check register for November 2022, and further that the check register for November 2022 with checks, EFTs, and PAPs totaling $1,458,365.13 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your payroll register.
We had 2 pay periods in November with net direct deposits totaling $542,302.92.
Any questions on the payroll register? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve it? Councillors McKechnie and Carter.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Carter, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the payroll register for November 2022, and that the payroll register for November 2022 with net direct deposits totaling $542,302.92 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your year-to-date actuals.
Since this report is new to a few of you for the first time, I want to point out a couple of things. We have set up our year-to-date report in this format to coincide with our FIR reporting, if you're wondering of its format. I also want to point out that you will see a budget for our amortization expense on that. However, if you look further down the report, you will see that this is added back in as a non-cash amortization line. Therefore, it has zero impact on the levy and is just an internal accounting entry. And as you can see from the report, as of the end of November, we're 91.55% spent in operating expenses and 90.11% spent in our capital expenses. This report does not reflect our final levy payment, which is scheduled to be received tomorrow. And we are currently anticipating to end the year on budget.
Any questions on the year-to-date actuals? Councillor Carter.
Just, you answered my first question on the levy payment, but then the other one was item 11 or item 10, municipal funding. I just want to know what it was.
Oh, so that any services, a lot of it's through IT and public works. So any services that the county does could be plowing or phones or things like that, invoicing back to the municipalities for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this report, Councillor Burton?
If I may, Warden, we at one time used to go through the accounts and then through the invoices. I don't know whether it was the mayors did it at that time. And I was asked the other day, and it was an interesting question, why we don't do that anymore. And I thought it was COVID related because I thought there was procedure out there that we had to do that.
I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't COVID related. It was a decision that council made to not do that anymore. It's I mean, those are public documents. You're more than welcome to look through them. It's not I would consider a common practice in municipalities for that to happen. In fact, I'm not sure any other municipality it does. But those are public documents. We have, you know, the check register is attached to the check register report, so you can see what checks were written to whom and how much. But it was council's decision to stop that practice.
I think that that's been the case with a lot of municipalities aren't doing it anymore. We used to do it in Algonquin Highlands on a regular basis and don't any longer because the information is there, because we've all looked really carefully at the details of the budget, and beyond that, it's a staff's role and the information is there, and we have liaison members of council set up for that if they so desire. Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the year-to-date actuals? Councillors Ryle and Dayou.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Dayou. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the year-to-date actuals as at November 30th, 2022. And further that the year-to-date actuals as at November 30th, 2022 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is your renewal of employee benefits, and what a nice surprise.
Yes, this report is a good news story overall. As you can imagine, a decrease in premium rates is not the industry norm right now. So it was a pleasant surprise when we met with K Brewer Financial Services. The county has seen a shift in the demographics of their staff along with reduction in our claims activity, which has resulted in a renewal of an overall decrease of 1.8%.
Any questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder receive this? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just if I could make a comment, because it is you know, this isn't the industry norm, I can assure you. You know, this is an area where you see the benefit of the proactive things that we do. And you know, I think there has been a concerted effort to focus on wellness activities. That was a big, you know, impetus for that was the pandemic, but we really did make some concerted effort. And I did have a conversation even this week with an employee who said, you know what, I was able to take advantage of some of that, our benefits in order to. And if I hadn't done that, there's no doubt I would have been on a leave. Those are kinds of things where it is a very small investment, relatively small. But if that employee had gone on leave, it would have left a big gap in the organization, loss of productivity in the organization, and there would have been an expense, you know, it would have been very expensive too. So I know we tend to see benefits as an expense, and they are costly, but they are also an investment in our employees, and they actually pay dividends in many ways. So Andrea, lost over, but they have done a great amount of work in early and safe return to work, getting employees back if they've been injured or are ill, providing modified duties. We've focused on wellness initiatives, and even talked to our staff about how to best use our benefit plan so as to limit costs. So great job to Andrea and her staff. This is no small feat.
Well done. Did we have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Fury.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Fury. Be it resolved that the staff report on the 2023 renewal of employee benefits be received by Haliburton County Council, and that the employee benefit renewal proposal by K Brewer Financial Services effective February 1st, 2023 be hereby approved.
All in favor? It's carried. Next is the reissue of the single tier waste management service delivery review, RFP. Exciting project. So you're going to speak to that?
Yes, staff were directed at the November 23rd meeting to provide the updated single tier waste management service delivery review RFP. And today we are now bringing that back, asking for direction to release the document.
Comments or questions?
I should say we have actually Tricia McKibben from Minden Hills. She's the CAO lead for the service delivery review waste management working group, and John Watson, who is very active in that group but he's the I don't know your formal title, John, but the waste management manager for Dysart. So they're here to answer specific questions if there are any.
And are there questions? Councillor Fury.
First of all, I like the scope of what we're going to accomplish here and how much this is going to cost as far as consultants go. Or are we doing it with consultants?
Yeah, the idea, our budget, I believe, was $75,000.
Yes.
75?
Yes.
Yeah. I think in our case, largely because so the way the costs were divided up, the county would pay 50% and the municipalities would split the remaining 50. Our share would be, or proposed to be funded from our climate change project money. So if you look at our climate impact reports and our mitigation plans, landfill emissions are really one of the biggest drivers are greenhouse gas emissions. So of our greenhouse gas emissions. So we thought it was appropriate to recommend that it be paid for through that fund, and if the previous county council approved that, but it's obviously subject to your approval.
Take your point about consultants and the cost of consultants, but I think that, a lot of the service delivery work has been done off the corner of folks' desks that are already pretty busy with regular work. And I think the hope would be that if we can find a successful path to move forward on consolidating waste management, that there will be cost savings that will offset the expense that we put into the study. Councillor Carter, then back to Councillor Fury.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm new to this council, so don't know what was described in the past, but I would have liked to see some sort of a preamble that says, before we go out and issue an RFP or decide to spend some money on studies, what generally can we expect to achieve? I mean, how many, I know that they're in the document, there's all the little dots on all our waste management sites, but I really don't have a clear or quick access to how much is this totally costing us? How much are the changes in legislation that are coming up, how much are they going to potentially impact us? What would this study tell us about, what possible savings or expense avoidance could come of it? I guess I'd like to have a better idea of what it is that we might be able to accomplish. I'm all for everything that we're doing in terms of all the soft savings that we may have, but I really would like to see what some of the dollar savings are before we go ahead. I'm not trying to slow this down in any way, shape, or form, but I would hope that before we would be asked to, approve the awarding of this contract, that we would have some idea of what the potential benefits could be to us.
We'll go to our CIO first.
I think we can, CAO McKibben is in the room, and I'm sure that's something that she can work with the waste management working group to come up with before we bring a proposal to award. But did you want to speak to that?
Through the chair, those are some of the questions that the working group have themselves, that the purpose of the RFP is to gather some of that information. And even so far as how much is the total cost of going out to do a study going to be? Right now, we're doing our best estimate of 75,000. We're hoping it'll come in less, but that is this is the first step in the process of going out to RFP, seeing what comes back, seeing what is proposed for the scope of work that we put out the scope of work, but seeing what proposals come in, and that'll allow us to have a bit more information to bring back for step 2. So today, what we're really looking for is we know that we need more information, and this is in our minds, the first step to gather that information.
Another thing that I'd like to see as part of the work that's being done is the risk management that's associated with it, because we all have different levels of waste management, different sizes of landfill sites, different risks associated with them. So, before we move to a single level of responsibility for waste management, I'd want to know, what those implications are. I see Councillor Dayu, then Councillor Rial, and then back to Councillor Perry.
It sounds like I may be putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse here somewhat, but if we are tying it to climate change, which I think is very wise, I'd also be very interested in hearing, is it going to be simply an administrative review, or are there also going to be benefits to our greenhouse gas emission targets that we're going to be looking for? What sort of information will we be seeking about how going single tier might impact our greenhouse gas emissions?
Councillor Rail.
Yeah, you may have already touched on this before, and if you did, I've probably forgotten. At my age, I forget a lot of things. But the long and the short of it is the Blue Box program, and the challenge is that it's been across the entire province trying to get this thing going, especially in rural Ontario. And a lot of, last time I was brought up to speed on it, there was still a whole bunch of holes in it that more or less still had to be answered. And it seems to me that it would be a pretty good candidate to go to the county if that's what we were going to do with waste management in general. Have you got comment on that, and is it included in the proposal?
So the Blue Box program is transitioning starting in 2024. The 4 lower municipalities will be transitioning to the new program throughout that year. This RFP and the work that the consultants would be doing would include some of that information as that program becomes uploaded to the extended producer responsibility organizations for residential Blue Box. That regulation does not include commercial Blue Box materials. And so there's definitely some work that this kind of RFP could look at around how we service the commercial sector whose Blue Box material would not be included in that new regulation.
Councillor Fury.
I think it's going to work out, but to me, these things are budget items and they should be approved in budget. We shouldn't be approving them today. So, I think that it's clear that you do the RFP, so it wouldn't come back for a month or two anyway. Is that what I heard?
If we'd let Mr. Ritter speak to that.
I can't speak for the local municipalities, but I know the county budgeted for this in 2022. So the budget money was
already
there
there.
to do it in 2022.
Good.
You can't be blamed for that.
No. It may not be enough, though. That's what we're finding these things.
But you're, I mean, you're right in that it's a budget consideration for the lower tiers. And how much that at. Councillor Carter.
It's just we're all on the same page. What we're doing here is we're saying, you can go out and get the RFP so that you can get an idea of what you're gonna totally need in terms of funding, and then it will come back to us for an approval. So we're not spending any money, we're just going out to get an RFP at this point. Correct?
Yes.
Nods all around. Yay.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then to proceed? Councillors Royale and Carter.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that Halliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the reissuance of the single tier waste management service delivery review RFP, and that Halliburton Council directs staff to release the request for proposal as presented.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Andrea. Next is an emergency response vehicle purchase.
Morning, Warden, members of council.
Morning, Chief.
Just, we put out an RFP for two additional emergency response vehicles. One will be replacing one of our existing vehicles, 4378. One will be an additional vehicle to enhance the community paramedic program. And just to clarify that this money is, these vehicles are being purchased 100% with the community paramedic funding from the long-term care program.
That's good news. Questions or comments? Councillor Shell.
I love that you put the assumption price of $1 per liter on the bottom.
Oh, that was just, yeah, I think that was a calculation for.
No, I know, be
just
nice if it was that.
Yes, it would be, yes.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve this? Councillor McKechnie and Burton.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Halliburton County Council receives the December 14th, 2022 staff report for emergency response vehicle purchase, and that staff be directed to proceed with the purchase of two fully converted gas Ford Explorers to meet all standards required by the Ministry of Health from Kerr Industries Limited.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is a report on economic development website work. Good morning.
To this. So this is just kind of a housekeeping report based on our procurement policy. Just letting council know that we're proceeding with working with local intel on a new economic development website. And kind of the purpose behind this is that we've identified really early on in our development of the economic development strategy that communication and where to find information for businesses within the community has been really, it's a priority. And we feel this is also a result of the COVID pandemic when businesses are on information overload and they're looking for kind of a centralized location and a one-stop shop where they can attain that. So we're hopeful that we'll kind of have a soft launch in the new year and then kind of align this with hopefully the adoption of the economic development strategy in the new year as well. Happy to field any questions.
Any questions associated with this? Councillor Daya?
I wonder if you would kindly clarify what you mean in the report by local intel will be providing and maintaining the following A, B, C, and D advantages. I see advantages over and over again. And the sense that I get when I read the term advantages is it's almost more of a marketing strategy to bring businesses to Halliburton. But from hearing you speak, it isn't just about, hey, come play with us. It is more about, here's the information you require. So could you just unpack that a tiny bit?
Yeah, that just might be kind of some verbiage clarification there. It's really, it can be used as a marketing tool, but really we look at as a way that businesses within the county can find that information. It's very centralized, and then utilize it for their own purposes, whether that's from, market information for customers, employee attraction, transportation advantages, et cetera.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Carter.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Carter, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the December 14th, 2022 report, Economic Development website for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a report on strategic planning and developing a 6-month action plan. And we look to Mr. Rutter for that report.
Thank you, Warden. We had some conversation in our orientation session a couple of weeks ago about this, or a few weeks ago now. And so I just wanted to put something, or council asked me to put something on paper. And so I've really divided it up into 2 processes. The strategic planning process, which I always feel are better left until council have had a chance to familiarize themselves with issues, to sort of get their feet under them in some ways. And so I've laid a little bit about what I would foresee in terms of a process and the reasons for it. But that is a really critical document for us to make sure that staff are in alignment with council's wishes. That's really important. And I think it's even more critical when your community is changing so quickly, as quickly as ours is now. So that's we're hoping to do that in starting maybe in mid-year. But obviously work has to begin on a number of different issues. And so I've tried to outline what a number of those sort of issues are that we need some direction in the more immediate term. And I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, maybe just to discuss the next steps. The shoreline preservation bylaw, I believe we kind of have a next step now, and we'll see what January brings. The service delivery review, again, we have made a number of accomplishments. We have a countywide economic development department, which has merged with the tourism department. We have created a procurement coordinator position and partnered with the County of Peterborough, who are mentoring our staff and assisting in policy and process reviews. That is really critical because the majority of the savings that were identified in the service delivery review, or opportunities for savings, were really the result of collaborative procurement. And so I think you've seen in a couple already reports today where we have worked together to purchase things. Algonquin Highlands is partnering with us on the tandem, and so we're hopeful that we can see more and more of that. Experience has been that where municipalities work together in procurement, there's a 15% savings or so. That's the sort of industry experience. We've also done the request for proposal for a single tier waste management review. Today we got the approval to spend that money. I'm just kidding. We got approval to release the RFP, so we'll be proceeding with that right away. The short-term rental regulations, we do have a background report which included a review of approaches taken by other communities, and we really do need, this council to say what next in that regard. So we'll proposing to bring a report forward in January 23 to get your direction. The economic development strategic plan is underway. We hope that the Strexer Harrop Consulting Group has been in touch with each of you. They are attempting to. If they haven't already, please contact Scott, because they really do want your input on the in phase 1. Really important, actually. So if they haven't reached out to you already or been in touch, please let Scott know. Phases 2 and 3 of the strategy will be completed by April 2023. And so that work is underway.
Just to break in, I'm seeing shaking heads about us being contacted.
We'll we'll make sure Scott deals with that.
Has anyone been contacted by them? You have. You lucky person.
Scott?
If I may, Warden, some of their emails. So I would just. I just encourage you to check your junk emails a bit further. And it isn't a like March test either. So.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
The EMS master plan, again, you've had your opportunity for input into that. And by all means, if you want more, then that is more than welcome. But we expect to see a report in January on that. Reserve and debt management policies. We really have three debts that are outstanding. We've tried to show you what the initial balance was, what the remaining balance was, and I'm getting confused in my presentations. I think we've added interest rates in our budget presentation, but you'll see that at a different time. We're not proposing to take the budget as it's drafted doesn't contemplate any new debt in 2023. So I'm suggesting that work could probably be done later in the year in that policy review. The operating and capital budgets are drafted. I think the one piece of missing information that we're aware of at this point is the insurance renewal, and we're assured that will be here sometime in early January. We expect that you will have your budget binders, so our budget reports in the week between Christmas and New Year's. I know that I checked all your calendars. The 25th is free, so if you could work at that would be great. But we wanted to give you 2 weeks, 2 full weeks to review those documents, and we know that there will be lots of questions. So we wanted to provide as much opportunity to do that as we could. We are hopeful. I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone. It's not a great news document that you're going to receive. So it's one of the it is the most challenging budget I've done in my 31 years or so. So not something I'm happy about at all. The rural transit, we've sort of dipped our toes in water a few times on this. And I've tried to sort of give a summary of what we've done in that space over the last few years. We do have some money, and we are participating in a couple pilot projects. We hope to bring that information forward, and then see what council wants to do with that, or if the time is right to do that. I will say that in everything that we do, whether it's community safety and well-being plan, economic development strategy, it seems everything that we do, we hear that there's no transit available. That's why, it's the root of so many problems. So we'll be bringing a report forward hopefully in February to talk about what our next steps could be and get some direction from you on that. Near the end of the previous council's term, there was a conversation about two things that sort of we think they're connected. The first is a lake health program, and so council asked us to develop a job description on what that lake health program could look like, or what the job that supported the lake health program would look like, and so we have done that. We've also partnered with ULinks to look at a water quality testing program that will occur over 2 summers, I believe, and that information will be coming forward. We get regular updates from them. They're just tremendous to work with. So but in the longer term, the previous Councillor Moffat in particular presented a report, I think at the last meeting of council, that talked about the creation of a Haliburton Watershed Council. So again, we probably will reference that report, but we'll bring back something to say, here's, you know, the direction we've received, here's the work we've been doing. Now we want you to give us some direction on what is next. And we'll hopefully bring that back in January. The development charges, we've talked a lot about this. The work began on the development charges study, and shortly after that, they realized that our population projections were really outdated. And because of the rapid growth that we have been experiencing in the last couple of years, that really is critical information to developing or calculating a development or community benefit charge. And so we really need to step back and either update those or abandon the study altogether. I guess at the same time, the province has made a number of different, introduced a number of different changes to legislation related to development and community benefits charges. What we would propose to do is bring the consultants to council who could talk about the reasons that they would suggest the updated population projections, tell us about the changes in the legislation and how they may or may not impact us, and then a staff report talking about other ways that those population projections could be utilized by staff. And an example would be updates of official plans when that is required. So we're again proposing to come back in January with that report and the consultants. The municipal accommodation tax, the council received an update on how we could implement it if you chose to. Basically, the previous council tied it to the short-term rental licensing and enforcement program and said, if something like that is implemented, then this is something that could be considered. So in some ways, those two issues are connected. Housing is it's a crisis across the province and in Haliburton County. There are a number of things that are happening already. I think that I've tried to outline a couple. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus is proposing to work with other levels of government and others in the housing sector. It would certainly include the private sector to develop 7,000 units in the next 7 years. Largely looking at the rental market and largely looking at the affordable or the wait lists for housing. That is over the 13 counties and potentially the 10 separated cities in Eastern Ontario. So that's not 7,000 units in Haliburton. But what we're hoping to see, there is a request for proposal out right now to help with the development of a business case for this. But what we're hoping to see is a program that's flexible enough that if existing programs, and I think of the Highway 35 project in Minden as a perfect example. So if existing programs for one reason or another aren't moving forward, or projects aren't moving forward, then it may be an opportunity to provide some additional capital, gain access to some additional capital, and let those be built. It's not the intention for the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus to own those 7,000 units. It's not the intention for the Wardens Caucus to operate those units. But it is something where we hope it will be it will access funds that will be able to add to either projects that are on the shelf that for one reason or another haven't proceeded or have are still in the development stage. We do currently have $275,000 in our existing budget to fund the Affordable Housing Targets program. Council will recall, and I think I talked about this, that we have a housing and homelessness plan and an Affordable Housing Targets program where we are, at the time, pre-COVID, we were looking at requiring 750 approximately units across the county of Haliburton over the next decade. 250 of those were to be built by existing not-for-profits like KLHHC, and 500 were to be sort of incentivized to work with the private sector to build them. We've had a number of applications, but I'm not sure that we've actually spent any of that money. But we have been transferring that money to reserves. I know County Council committed 360,000, I believe, to the Highway 35 project. But there is additional funds that are in reserve as well. I only say that to say I think we're well positioned if there's a requirement for us to participate financially in a Warden's Caucus project for units built in Haliburton County. I think we're positioned well to have some funds to contribute. We have been approached by a housing provider locally about doing a housing summit in April of this year or next year. The goal would be to create a countywide housing task force comprised of representatives from the many initiatives that are underway or planned, and it would include not-for-profit and market developers. The purpose would be to streamline the process by sharing knowledge from a user perspective, and in the long term, it could result in planning collaboratively to reduce competition for limited funds. So those are the housing providers' words, not mine. But I do think it's an opportunity to talk about best practice, talk about what's happening from all of the people that are actually doing building housing in the county, to see if we can do it in a more streamlined way, what their issues are, maybe with our planning processes, maybe they have issues with funding that we could assist with, maybe even from an advocacy standpoint. But it would be interesting to get everyone in the room to have those conversations. The county's role is not fully defined, and that would be obviously approved by you. But the task force could certainly benefit, I believe, from our administrative help to put all of that together. So so that is a very quick overview of what the major projects over the next few months, and a bit of a direction, a bit of a timetable on how we are proposing to move forward.
A lot of information there, a lot of work ahead. Comments or questions? Councillor Carter, then Councillor Fury.
So, Mr. Rutter, thank you for your ability to see the unending capacity and capability of council, and for also filling up all that boring time that we usually have between Christmas and New Year's with documents and such to study. I guess, my general question is, you've laid out the plan of the things that we need to look at. You also, during the rest of this meeting, have been telling us how we have to get the budget done. We have a few other odds and sods that we need to do in order to keep the county running during that time period. So I guess my question is, how are we going to do all this in the time that we have available?
One step at a time.
Yeah. I tell our staff all the time, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I think Councillor Fury made a comment earlier. Much of this is dependent on budget, and so that really is a critical document. Some of the reason we need to get some of these issues in front of you so that you can give us some direction is for us to know if we have to include anything in those budget documents or not. And there are some that we have, and some that we haven't. So Lake Health, as an example, we haven't included anything in the budget for that. But shoreline preservation we have. So it's going to be a busy couple months. There's absolutely no question about that. We are a little bit flexible with our budget timelines. We're not saying January it has to be passed. I'll risk the wrath of Andrea later. We're not even saying February it has to be passed. If we know that your municipalities will be, the local municipalities will be looking at us to have county tax rates set, so that they can do some billing, but there's really not a hard and fast deadline, particularly if council is flexible like you were this morning to allow us to tender like a tandem truck or something like that, that's really helpful. So that we, I know we'll be coming for resurfacing and pavement, a similar kind of report in January, asking for approval to go ahead with the RFP. So it's going to be a busy few months. There's no question. Hopefully we can get through it. I don't have any expectation that, as an example, like we know some of these things will be part of a work plan over the next few months, years. Like we know that they're not all going to happen right away. But our job is to get those update reports in front of you. And I am committing to do that. I'm committing that they will do that. And we will, yeah, and then you can give us direction from there. But I'm not under any illusion that everything in there will be undertaken in 2023. I know that won't be the case in all likelihood.
And some are underway and some are very, I think, very much longer term.
Yeah.
Councillor Fury.
Well, if Mike would just tell us that the county is going to come in at zero, then the municipalities will go ahead. But you're not going to do that. I wonder if there's an opportunity for a local housing authority.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because it's something that I've talked about quite a bit in the last few months. And I'm wondering, with respect to this forum that's being proposed, it's something that I had been suggesting that the county do. And I'm not quite sure where the best place for that is. But, I really do believe that the county and the municipalities need to take the bull by the horns and start to look at whatever opportunities we've got, whether they're inside or outside the box, to get some housing. I've just caused pain to Councillor Carter, but I do believe that it's something that we really need to place an emphasis on, and the best approach for that is I'm not sure.
Well, I'd just like to say that I would like to see the local housing authority give local people a chance to go in there, because we're seeing some horror cases in Haliburton, the social housing aspect. So,
Well, that's a bit of a challenge. I think maybe Councillor Carter would like to speak to that.
If you are going to have affordable housing in order to, the definitions are well defined as what the rent could be or so on. And if it is getting support from various levels of government, federal, provincial dollars, then you have to commit to taking from a list of people. That is, the list is held by the province. And, there are ways where people can change their priority on the list by if there's domestic violence and a number of other things. But generally, you have to go to the first person on the list and say, do you want one of these units? And I think the last numbers I saw, about 74% of the people who are going into units in Haliburton County are connected to Haliburton County. Okay, they either live here currently or they are now right outside of the county but want to return. So that's the case. But I drive for Triple HS, and I picked up a guy who was from Guelph. And when he went on to the list in the province, he basically listed every county in the province. And when Haliburton came up, because he was first on the list, he went, "Hey, sounds good to me." And off he went to Haliburton County. So it's difficult, but as long as you're taking money from the province or the feds, you have to obey their rules. So no local housing authority would be able to give preference to local people if you're taking money from the government. And that's the only way you can afford to have affordable housing, is with those monies.
Well, and I think maybe Councillor Fury and you and I may have been talking about two separate things. Because when I speak about a forum, I'm talking about, let's look at the different ways that we can provide housing or get housing construction going for all different needs, as opposed to a housing authority, which is something else that I have from time to time had the same thought.
I think there's a difference between social housing and affordable housing. I see two different levels there.
Fine line.
No doubt, but if, in order to keep the costs, look, our general problem right now, the Highway 35 as an example, and any other housing, you can get money to build housing. But the thing is that it comes down to the mortgage that you now have, and you have to pay that mortgage. And if that mortgage means it's $1,500 per unit per month, when the number for affordable housing is like $1,600 a month, your total expenses exceed what the affordable housing numbers are. And so therefore it's no longer considered affordable housing. We can build all sorts of units at $2,500 or $3,000 a month, but then we're not part of any programs that are associated with affordable housing, and we can't get access to government funding. It's pretty simple numbers right now, and the discrepancy is the numbers for what the average monthly rent is and what it actually costs today. You can build it, you just can't make it affordable.
Are there other questions or comments about housing in particular and or other aspects of this report? Councillor Dayu.
Sticking to housing for the moment. So I'm hearing about a forum that could be quite exciting. I'm hearing about formats like potential housing authorities, obviously constraints there. Is there going to be, or could there be a moment in the future in which all of these things will land together and we will be instructed on what the powers of municipalities are to leverage housing, and not that we're doing all of them or we should be doing all of them, but what are the menu of things that this council could consider in order to attend to the emergent crisis, which is housing?
Please.
Take a shot.
Your mic. Your mic.
My mic. I'll take a shot. So hopefully the housing summit that's being proposed would create lots of those conversations about what people who are actually trying to build housing in the county are experiencing and what could we do to help. So there may be some requests of us or some ideas planted at that point. So that may be part of the solution.
Might I be so bold as to ask who is proposing this?
Faye Martin is the one I've been speaking to. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying that. And she's been working with HCDC, I believe, to put something together. The other thing is the City of Kawartha Lakes is our consolidated service manager for housing. And so there's and they also are the sole shareholder of KLHHC, but we are, clearly we're part of their customer as well. And we have representation on their board of directors. They are coming in January to do an orientation on their sort of what their programs and all of the things they can provide. And I think they would be well positioned, particularly the KLHHC staff, to advise council on things we could do to help see, either incentivize or help with the development of more housing alternatives in the county. So I think that's another part of it as well. We continue to have the Affordable Housing Targets Program, which was intended to be a partnership with the local municipalities where if someone were to come in and build units, affordable units that would take people off the consolidated wait list, that there would be things we could do to help with that development. Things like forgiving building permits, forgiving waste fees at landfills, forgiving in the counties. We had financial incentives at so much per unit. And as I say, we had budgeted $275,000 a year, and it just, there hasn't been an uptake on it because it just isn't enough to change the business case. So I know the city of Kawartha Lakes is looking at alternatives to that, how we can tweak that program, how we can make it, but to this point, we haven't really seen a lot of that. The other thing that I think is an impediment for development of housing in the county is servicing, and you know, we have one fully serviced community with water and wastewater. I guess two with Cardiff, but there's limited capacity there. And then we have one community with just wastewater, and that creates it's more costly to develop housing, particularly multi-residential in those areas. I don't have a lot of specifics, but I've mentioned it in my report. The County of Frontenac has used some modernization funding to work with WSP, which is a large engineering firm, to come up with an alternative, basically a communal servicing option, so that you know, I point to your seat because it used to be Councillor Moffat, and she used to talk about this a lot. But you know, how can we ensure that there are development opportunities in rural areas that don't have any servicing at all? How do we make sure that people have options, housing options there too? And I think that provides us some real hope, because you can build more intense developments with that communal servicing, communal water and wastewater particularly. So I'm hopeful that allows us to spread the development of housing around the county, knowing that, you know, transit's important, knowing that access to services is important. There's all kinds of things that go into that mix, but it's such a complex issue, and there's so many layers to it, that I don't think there's one solution that we're going to say, yeah, that's it, we finally found it. But you know, the other thing, to Councillor Fury's point, similar to KLHHC, Peterborough County and City have the Peterborough Housing Corporation, and they have decided to abandon that. And our auditor, Oscar Poloni, actually did a report for them on the creation of a new housing authority that would, and I'm not familiar with all of the detail, but it would certainly, the idea was they needed to build more, and they needed to build faster, and they needed to build a broader range of housing. And so he gave them some suggestions on the creation, basically abandon the existing housing corporation or let it manage its existing units, but new units would be built through this new housing authority, that it would have a different mandate and a different structure. And so those are things we can investigate, but you know, a task force with people that are actually doing this work would be really helpful for us, because in some ways we're buying and selling both. We don't build housing at the County of Haliburton, but Kawartha Lakes Housing, Haliburton Housing do, the point, you know, the Places for People do, the private sector developers do, but we don't work with them on a day-to-day basis. So we really need to partner with them and figure out what the issues are, and then see if there's a role, if there is a role at all for county to play. Sorry, long rambling answer, but it's such a complex issue.
Councillor Ryall, then Councillor Carter.
First off, thanks for that. It's not long and drawn out. It was very, very detailed, and you gave us a lot of good information. But I could ask a dumb question, so I'm going to do it now. Would the designation of CIP in any given area bring anything to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to see a CIP for housing across the county. Absolutely. I've seen it work very effectively when I was in, you know, it's a long time ago now, but when I was in my previous municipality, we had a community improvement program where it incentivized the development of secondary units above commercial on main streets in particular. It created a number of residential units, but it also supported the commercial activity below, so that the landlord could rent out that commercial activity at a much reduced rate and still have a profitable building. But it also resulted in rental space up above. So I think there's tremendous potential for that. And we could, that's something we could consider doing at the county level, I think. We would need to make sure that everybody's official plans were updated so that it would allow for that. But they're a great tool and have been useful in other communities, no question, for various.
Councillor Carter.
So just to build a little bit on what was said, we do have a housing authority. It's really KLHHC. And up until very recently, the majority of the board of KLHHC are from Haliburton County. So we are very well, or have been very well represented there. One of the issues that, when we talked about building new units in people's homes and so on, there are a whole bunch of, it's not only Haliburton that had a slow uptake on that. The same thing happened right through Kawartha Lakes, and KLHHC studied it and came up with some of the reasons for it. Some of those reasons include the Landlord and Tenant Act, and insurance companies, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of issues here, and I dumped over to Aqua's board to say, hey, you guys are the premier, water testers in across the province. Why don't you guys come up with some solutions for what we do in rural areas where we don't have municipal sewer and water? How can we have micro systems? I've been dealing with a company down in Peterborough that's a spin-off of Trent University, who have been building these types of systems all around the world, but like many Canadian companies, they can't ever get acceptance, locally. So there are some solutions, and I think a housing summit would be something that would be very beneficial, and we could get out some of these ideas. But I think a lot of the issues come down to back in the 80s, when we had places like Stanworth that were built with government money, where they were actually paying for bricks and mortars. Sometime after that, there were new approaches to how to do that. Unfortunately, those approaches don't work anymore. And so unless we can get some changes in how people think about things like mortgages at the federal and provincial level, or how, if we can get grants from the provincial or federal governments that would allow you to build bricks and mortar, we're in a very tough situation now with not only with the economics or with the economy, it's the cost of materials, it's a shortage of labor, it's rising interest rates. It's a real challenge, and hopefully some of these things can be handled, because we need delegations from EHORN or the Warden's Caucus, and the Roma and AMO, to be able to try to get the provincial and federal governments to be looking at this under a different light. And so, anyway.
If I could on that, so I know that the Warden's Caucus staff met with the federal minister of housing very recently, who said, we're flowing billions of dollars starting in March. Really excited about your proposal, and really excited to see projects in the queue from Eastern Ontario. It's projects like the 35 development that we have on the shelf that I think would be great, because the pro forma fell apart during, because of interest rates and because of funding models and all of that. But if we can find another source of revenue that we can tap in, it may be the thing that tips it over the edge and makes it feasible. Those are things I'm really hopeful that the 7007 program that the EOWC are proposing is flexible enough that we can just say, oh, we've got one on the shelf, let's pull it off, let's put that in. I think it could be a really some really low-hanging fruit and some early wins.
One more. We've got a break here shortly.
Yeah, okay, sorry, just to build on that, KLHHC, right now, there's nothing that we can build. Peterborough Housing has got the same thing. Other housing authorities that we're talking to, everybody is in the same boat right now. There's pretty much no affordable housing being built. Different from, housing in general, but by the rules of affordable housing, the economics, you can do it on the back of an envelope. You can, the project will fail right from the outset. So we're not the only ones here.
Any other questions or concerns about the report overall, about steps over the next few months? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Councillors Fury and Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Fury, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the strategic planning and 6-month action plan staff report dated December 14th, 2022, and that staff be directed to proceed as outlined in the report.
All in favor? That's carried. I propose that we break for lunch now. Maybe would 1 o'clock be sufficient time to reconvene? We've got a few smaller items to deal with, and then we've got some orientation. Sure, I'm looking forward to. Yeah. Yeah, of course I do. Our staff of sitting, waiting patiently. Reports and minutes from external boards and agencies and. Welcome back. We're into reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. I'm not sure that there's a lot of information, so we can probably get through that fairly quickly. I don't think we have anything from the health unit, anything from Point in Time. The Wardens Caucus is due to have their inaugural meeting on the 12th and the 13th of January. They have a meeting on the 19th. It's a virtual meeting to talk about anything that we need to discuss before we go to Roma, because there's normally the meeting that the Wardens Caucus has with the ministers. So we prepare for that. I don't know that there's anything for joint social and housing services. Nothing from the library board. Anything from Good Roads?
No, other than the election was pretty hard on my board of directors. I think it wiped out, the president, the second vice president, and 3 members. So that's why I couldn't be at the last committee of the whole meeting, as they needed me down there to do some voting on trying to get a new board put together.
So they're working on that.
They're working on that, is right.
Looking for.
Yeah, we lost our
expressions of
president.
interest.
That was unreal.
Anything on ERM that you want to let us know about? Okay, well, we'll move directly into, could I have a mover and a seconder to just receive for information the external reports? Councillor McKechnie and seconded by Councillor Carter.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the October 25th, 2022 minutes from Point in Time Center for Children, Youth and Parents.
All in favor? It's carried. Everyone's had a look at the meeting calendar. Any conflicts or errors or omissions? Hearing none, we'll move into the more exciting part of the day, and that would be council orientation. And up first is our CEO of the library. Hi, Chris.
And good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of council, both new and returning. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to update you on what's happening at the Haliburton County Public Library. My name is Chris Stevenson. Excuse me. I'm the chief librarian, or the library CEO. And I've been with the library now since September 2021, just about 14 and a half months. I'm here today to give you a short history about the library, where we're going in terms of priorities and challenges, and then also describe the ways in which public libraries are organized and operate within Ontario. I also really look forward to getting to know you if I haven't met you yet, especially those members I see that are joining the library board. Welcome. If you have a question or two, I will make some time at the end, but please jump in if you need any clarification along the way, or if you'd like me to repeat anything. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So our team at the library is composed of staff who work at the library's administration center, which is adjacent to the Dysart branch in Haliburton, and also branch staff who work throughout the system at library locations across the county. There are currently seven admin team members plus 2 library couriers who keep the books and other materials flowing across the library system. And crucial, of course, to our day-to-day operations are the 14 branch staff who, as I say, work across the county in all of our facilities and actually move around throughout the week. Part-time roles appear in purple here. And you'll note the newly created marketing and communications coordinator role as a half-time position. Courier duties occur on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and branch staff work Tuesdays to Saturdays. And the office staff, on the other hand, are in Monday through Friday. Next slide, please. The library is overseen by a 9-person board composed of 4 members from each of the municipalities, an appointed mayor or deputy mayor. And as well, there are 4 public members, which are appointed by county council. And the warden sits on the board as an ex officio member. The board was established in 1965, and it provides oversight in the areas of budget and, of course, library finances. They also provide advice and policy creation and amendment, and advocacy and governance is really important on the library board. The board meets a minimum of 10 times per year. The Ontario Public Libraries Act is the key document, key piece of legislation which governs public libraries in the province, and it supports the provision of, quote, equal and universal access to information, and establishes free public library services in Ontario through governance and regulations, unquote. We're also a department within the county, but the separate board structure makes us a unique organization. The library board, for example, approves its budget and then approaches the council with a request. You'll even notice that my slides stand out a little different from the rest of my colleagues in the departments. Library funding is provided by the County of Haliburton with contributions from each municipality and also from the province of Ontario, through which we receive a small annual operating grant called the PLOG, Public Libraries Operating Grant. That, I will note, has not actually changed in size in the last 20 years or so. As well, HCPL and the library board are members of various library organizations throughout Ontario, which support us. And this connection ensures that we maintain consistently high quality library programs and services with the help of guidelines available to us, best practices, and then, of course, examples of new ways of working from our colleagues across the province. So we're always improving based on what we're learning in the library community at large. This also, these relationships also give us considerable purchasing power when it comes time to make purchases like e-resources, for example, we can buy as a part of the Ontario Library Consortium. Next slide, please. Haliburton County Public Library operates 7 physical branch locations, as well as a new service point called the Dorset Depot Library Lockers, seen on the screen in the top right. These lockers are part of a unique public-private partnership with Robinson's General Store, and we're really grateful for this sheltered space through the year to provide library access to the Dorset patrons. This is considered a temporary service solution, as the Dorset Rec Center, which we previously ran a library kiosk in for pickup and delivery, is currently closed due to some mold issues. Next slide. Thank you. This past summer, the library board supported a plan to purchase our first ever library courier and programming vehicle. In the past, we've borrowed a county vehicle for book delivery, as well as using library funds to support staff who use their vehicles for work. But the new van will allow us to bring programs and services to all parts of the county. So never before have we shown up in parks, say in Oxtongue Lake, but that will now be possible. This pop-up service will bring mobile Wi-Fi and technology kits to farmers markets or fall fairs, for example, and as well bring staff to deliver programming and outreach in unique places, which may surprise the public, including, for example, care homes. I wish I had better news about the van, but we found out after 2 months of waiting that the one that we picked with Dodge has been discontinued for 2023. So we're now on a waiting list for Ford's van. We'll see how that goes. Taking our show on the road is an important advocacy initiative, as well as people will see the library van passing through their communities. A lot of times people aren't aware that when they arrive at one of our branches that we're all connected, that we have a library system and that we work throughout with each of those communities. So we'll also be able to sign up people for library memberships wherever we go, as we have technology to accommodate us for this. And if you're familiar with bookmobiles from past eras in Ontario libraries, I think you'll be surprised by what's now possible for us to bring to the community members wherever we meet them. May I have the next slide, please? The library's mission has, over the past few decades, remained similar in scope, but we recently updated our mission, our vision, and our values statements after some substantial work with the library board, the staff as well, and community input over the course of a year or so. Previously, we used words such as serve and enrich, and we've updated this more recently to articulate that we support and empower. The result of this re-envisioning and modernization work, which began in 2021, can be found within the pages of our new 5-year strategic plan, which will point the direction for the library for the next 5 years to 2027. I believe that's included in your orientation package, along with the annual report for last summer. This year, we also embarked on a rebranding with a refreshed logo and new colors that you see on these slides. And we also built a new website last winter that has built-in accessibility features. And so you'll see elements of this and our colors on our social media currently, and on event posters that are happening in our branches. And for example, on the screen right now is the tagline, which has become our new motto. Next slide, please. An essential part of library service is facilitating programming at all of our locations for all community members and demographics of all ages. And we do this with the help of a full-time programming and outreach coordinator, Hillary, who joined us last year and develops and organizes in-house programs and events such as Storytime and Meet the Author Talks. Branch staff also develop and run programming, particularly in alignment with their interests and their expertise. This may include everything from writing circles to the seed library, local book clubs, or technology training for people of all ages. We have a really popular events calendar on the new website. It can be filtered for the area in which your favorite branch is. And pictured here is a few people from the Coffee and Coloring program, a partnership program with the Haliburton Highlands Health Services. I can't speak enough to the importance of the social component of public libraries, especially in the wake of an ongoing pandemic. It's really great to see families returning to the library. It's been a challenge for everyone, and we've kept going all through the period with the short break at the beginning. Next slide, please. We regularly partner with organizations from across Haliburton County and beyond, probably in the number of maybe 24 partnerships at any given time. It's always changing through the year seasonally. And we bring unique programming expertise and showcase new ideas and events. For example, in 2022, to name just a handful, we partnered with Alzheimer's Society, the Haliburton Highlands Genealogical Society, the local health unit, and the Nogo Jiwanong Friendship Center. Oh, and also Fleming Crew Employment Center. Last month, in November, for example, we had 343 people attend programs and events running in facilities across our library system. And you can just imagine what the summer is like, both inside and outside of our branches. We're currently writing some grants to have some students to help us with the increased capacity at that time. Next slide, please. One of the important features of our public library system is the 24/7 access to Wi-Fi at all of our branches, including Dorset. If you pull into the parking lot there at the rec center, the Wi-Fi is still going strong. Thanks to a recent grant from the Connecting Public Libraries Initiative, a $4.9 million provincial program, we're expecting that an upgrade to broadband internet service at approximately 50 public libraries across the province. And it looks like 2 of our branches, the last 2, which don't yet have fiber Wi-Fi, will be have been considered for this funding. We're just waiting to find out when that will be. So that will be the Highland Grove and the Cardiff branches. While at the library or wherever you may access the internet, your library card gives you access to over 90,000 ebooks and audiobooks, about 5,000 magazines now. And just this past month, we signed up for Press Reader, which gives Haliburton residents using the library or with a card access to newspapers across Canada, around the world. Everything from the Toronto Star and the National Post to the Cape Breton Post, and newspapers in Jerusalem, for example. So we really hope that these services will be used as they were through the pandemic as we build momentum. We also have digital streaming services through Canopy to access feature films, world cinema, and documentaries. So families all year round can tune in. It's been perfect for local film clubs, as well as documentary showings at the library. Through the pandemic, we shifted to curbside book pickup, something we still offer on demand. But we also launched instructional videos and unique online programming that could be accessed beyond our brick and mortar facilities. Public libraries don't just bring community members up to speed with device help or workshops or exploring new kits around technology, but we also work hard to make the organization accessible, both online as we consider our website a virtual branch, but also in our facilities. So you'll hear library workers often talking about how we're looking at ways of reducing barriers by factoring in the unique needs of the people who use our services. One example is that we made printing freely available up to a certain limit for those that dashed in and needed to print out government forms or COVID related ID. Shown in the top right is a microphone system that we installed at a number of our branches that just helped facilitate communication with our patrons through the glass partition, which we all became familiar with. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, library funding comes from a mix of municipal funding and a provincial grant, the PLOG. We generate some minor revenue from printing services ourselves, and in a few instances where there may be cost recovery if books go missing or come back damaged. But the Haliburton County Friends of the Library is a really important volunteer group that supports us. They advocate all year round and fundraise on our behalf. And a portion of their funding is derived from the books that they sell, may be donated from the public, but also books that have come off our shelves as we make room for new ones coming in each year. As I mentioned, we're also eligible for funding to hire new students and technology grants throughout the year, such as the discount that we received last year in hosting our new website. And this is, of course, due to our nonprofit status. This year, we also received funding from the Canadian Parents for French Ontario, local Rotary and Lions clubs, and support and donation as well from private citizens. Next slide, please. In 2021 and 2022, we experienced a significant change in staffing. We had many departures. About 145 years of collective library experience left us, but wouldn't you know, we had some really great people to choose from when it came time to rehire. So we're doing that now. We've all our positions are currently full. We have now on board for the first time ever 5 fully qualified librarians, and the rest, majority of the staff have gone through the 10 Ontario Library Systems Excel courses. So really qualified people at the library. We're fortunate to also receive support from my colleagues in various county departments such as Human Resources, County IT, and the Finance Department, which assist us in day-to-day operations with hiring, technology purchasing and maintenance, and as well accounts payable and payroll. In the last 18 months, we have filled and backfilled positions, it's been a challenge to maintain a level of service over a large geography, but we have a group of people who are traveling on behalf of the library to make that happen. Stanhope Branch was closed for over 2.5 years due to some accessibility renovations, and we're really thrilled that it opened last on Saturday, December 3rd, to great attention. We got probably 25 or 30 people in the building to check it out. The lift has been inspected now, and its staff have been trained on it. It's really exciting for us and the community. As mentioned previously, maybe you've heard about inflation affecting certain industries, and certainly the major book supplier that we use has informed us to expect 7 to 10% increases due to the cost of printing, paper, and especially shipping. So this has had an impact on our future budget, and we've readjusted numbers and drawn from areas that we can to make these to meet these increased costs as best we can, so that we can still continue to buy the same quality and quantity of books that we normally would. We're still feeling the effects of the provincial government's cuts to the Ontario Library Service in 2019. This, assisted us at the time with operating an interlibrary courier system between libraries in our area. So now we use predominantly Canada Post to ship those books as we share with others across Ontario. Lastly, in terms of other challenges, I think the marketing and communications position, which we're really happy to have, because it's a half-time role, it's been proving difficult for us to maintain workflow steadily, only because social media never sleeps. It's always going 7 days a week. And there's also a lot to tell the community about what we're up to. So one day we hope it could be ideally a full-time role. Next slide, please. It may not be commonly known, but I thought I'd take an opportunity to let residents and those curious about the library, anyone basically who's traveling beyond county borders, to know that we maintain reciprocal borrowing agreements with the following libraries and library systems. So for example, your library membership here will be accepted at these locations, which expands the choice and options for what you can borrow. And then, of course, if a patron from one of the above mentioned libraries comes to one of our branches, we simply ask to see their home library card and some ID indicating their address in the reciprocal system. So at the library, we're very much in the relationship building business as much as we are in the book business. Second last slide, please. It's been an exciting time in public libraries, certainly in my career, but especially in the last 3 years. But we are building momentum once again, and we hope to launch some really new and great initiatives that we've been planning as per our strategic plan, which you may have heard about in the news. We look forward to new partnerships and responding to feedback all through the year to shape library services based on the unique needs and desires of community members in all 4 of the municipalities. Whether it's the annual Bookapalooza event, which got going this year, or Stories in the Park Fun Fair with the local Lions Club, we endeavor to show up and connect with residents to remind them that the library is open. So over the coming months, we'll be working closely with our new incoming library board members as we help to orientate them and begin the first of our meetings, which will start at the beginning of 2023. And I'll note that the photo there is not me hugging CAO Mike Rutter. That's actually the very popular author Terry Follis, who joined us for Bookapalooza. It was a really great night. Last slide. At this point, I just wanted to say it's really great to meet you. I look forward to keeping you up to date over the next 4 years with what we have going on in terms of new developments and initiatives at all of our libraries. And at this time, if you have any questions, I'd certainly love to hear from you.
Chris, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. And I know you've only been with us for a very short period of time. But having been on the library board for basically all of the time you've been here, I want to thank you very much for what you've done for our library system across Halliburton County, and I am certainly impressed and looking forward to what you're going to be doing over the upcoming year and beyond. So thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you very much for your comments. Very kind.
I want to say. I'm in echoing what Councillor Royale said, you know, things have improved so dramatically since you've been here with us, Chris, that it really is much appreciated. Communications are so much better, you know, your regular reports that you give us, the whole atmosphere, you know, around the library board it's just improved dramatically, and for that, you know, your work is much appreciated, and that of all of your staff, because
Thank
I
you for
know that
saying.
it's a group effort.
Yeah, I really wanted to say that we've got a really great staff. We've got new people, but they're catching on super quick, and we've got lots of fun things planned for the communities. Thank you.
Forward to it. Thank you. I must apologize to council and to Mr. Stone, who's up next. I missed something on the agenda, and that is the expressions of interest for deputy warden. So I would look at this time for anyone who has an interest in being deputy warden to make that expression of interest now, and we will make that determination in January. Councillor Burton. Okay. Councillor Cart.
I too would also welcome the opportunity to serve as your deputy warden.
Well, it's good to have an interest in the position, and we look forward to hearing from you both in January, see how things go. And let's pray we don't have to draw the name out of a hat. Do we need any resolution there? No. Okay. We look forward to that. All right, over to you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair, rest of council. So for those, I'm Steve Stone, your Director of Planning. I've been here 18 months, and it's been an exciting time over that 18 months. Next slide, please. So this is the structure of our planning department. There is 5 full-time employees and 1 contract staff. This is the biggest we've been. And so all the positions are filled. We have a senior planner, secretary treasurer for the committee of adjustment. We have a receptionist, planning clerk. We have a climate change coordinator and a forester who's on contract with the county. Next slide, please. In terms of program priorities over the past 4 years, you'll see that as it was discussed earlier this morning, the shoreline tree preservation or protection bylaw has been in place for a number of years, but that was a very important thing to implement. The forestry harvesting bylaw has been in effect as well, and that's looked after by forestry, and they issue permits for harvesting of trees in the county. In terms of climate change, we've been county has tasked our climate change coordinator to come up with plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions corporately. We also have been tasked by the previous council to look at rural transit options. The bulk of our work from a number of our members of the department is really to manage the program around the Land Division Committee. Since the filling of a couple of positions, we've really had a bumper crop of applications presented to committee, and we're very successful in the approvals there. We also deal with, it's a delegated authority from the province to look after official plan amendments, and that includes the county official plan, but also to bring into conformity the local tier official plans. We also, the county is the approval authority behind plans, subdivision, and condominiums. And on the rare occasion, we also look after site plan control as it relates to our county roads. One of the things that another big project that has been happening for a number of years is the floodplain mapping project. And over the last 4 years, what we were able to do is to acquire LiDAR mapping, which is basically remote sensing photography that provides terrestrial data throughout the Gull watershed. And most recently, we acquired sonar data along several stretches of the rivers. And that was kind of interesting. Little submarines were out taking pictures of the river bottom. And we also have been tasked by the previous council to deal with a number of emerging issues. The new shoreline preservation bylaw, short-term rentals, and development charges, to say a few of those projects. Next slide, please. So when you look at bylaw and forestry priorities, those are mainly tasked to our county forester, Kestrel Forestry Consulting. James Rogers is the chap who's responsible for the following services. He does provide qualified forestry consulting, serves as the primary liaison for forestry matters on behalf of the county. So he actually meets the local contractors and helps them with their permits, and monitors how they're doing with their harvesting practices. And that's in relation to the forestry conservation bylaw 3196. So anytime a logger wants to remove trees in our forest, they have to get a permit. So, and as I said, he does visit the properties, and he helps the audits of the forest in terms of tree marking. And the other component when he's not helping out with tree harvesting is he responds to matters related to the existing shoreline tree preservation bylaw 3505, and there he makes visits to sites to assure bylaw compliance. And if there is obviously non-compliance, then he'll exercise a number of options. It could be that he issues a letter of compliance, which is to say that they acknowledge that they violated bylaw and they're going to work to restore it. He'll issue restoration orders in regards to those letters of compliance. And then sort of the extreme will be if it's a significant violation, he can issue tickets right on the spot, or he can summons them to court to obtain more significant fines and orders from the court to restore the properties. Next slide, please. Another big part of the department is the climate change priorities. And here the climate change coordinator is responsible for the following, which is the implementation of strategies outlined in the corporate climate change mitigation and adaptation plans. The coordinator is also developing a community-wide plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as well as building resilience for handling more extreme weather events. Data collection and monitoring of municipal and community greenhouse emissions is a big thing, and she'll be reporting in the new year with regards to those data collection efforts. And also she has a very important role in terms of community education on impacts and climate change. And she'll be bringing a number of reports to council in that regard. And as I said, in January, she'll have a couple of annual reports on the progress of the climate change initiatives here at the county. And a big thing that was delivered to your constituents this past year was the installation of electric vehicle charging stations. So, and one of the things that happens is she gets monthly reports on the usage, and it's been exciting to see the usage climb over the year. Next slide, please. Land division priorities. So as I mentioned, one of the things that's delegated as an approval function to the county is processing consent applications. And consent applications are usually deal with lots in a singular manner. So you're allowed to, by the official plan, create up to 3 new lots through the consent process. And like I said, we had a bumper crop of consents granted. One of the exciting things is we went throughout the year without any appeals. So that's just a testament of the energy that the community puts into being successful on their proposals, and also the energy that the committee does to hear the various issues and to find solutions. So no appeals is a marvelous thing. The committee itself is appointed by county council, and we're just in the throes now of getting the lower tier municipal appointees, and fingers crossed we'll have meeting plans certainly for February, or there's some discussion on whether we can actually move the first meeting up into January. Committee consists of 4 members from each municipality, and it is supported by the 2 staff persons I mentioned. So our secretary treasurer and the senior planner. And I just provided a quick little graph of the approvals that have happened over the last number of years. And as you can see, last year was the busiest we've been. So good on them. Next slide, please. So with the next priority is plan review priorities. And now, one of the things that since I've come on board is really to make our pre-consultations efficient amongst the lower tier municipalities in the county. And so we've been offering our services to help host those meetings through Zoom, to actually meet with folks here coming off the street and things like that. And through the pre-consultation process, one of the things that we see as a champion is really to provide what I call program certainty or approval certainty, which is to say, we understand the project, here's the various things that you actually need to submit. If you do, and the review is positive, you're going to get approval. And here's your overall time frame. Is it going to be 3 months? Is it going to be 4 months? And that's been received quite positively by the folks that we've been consulting with. We also, too, the senior planner and myself are registered professional planners, so we do sort of professionally, ethically have a responsibility to provide excellent customer service and to provide them with excellent advice. So we take that very seriously in our pre-consultation efforts. We also feel it very important to analyze the official plans, the amendments to them, and the plans of subdivision and condominium for compliance or consistency with the provincial policies, as well as conformity with our official plan and the 4 lower tier official plans. We provide comments to the lower tier municipalities on their site plans, especially if it involves development along the county road system. And in addition to sort of plan review functions, we actually provide reporting on municipal performance. And that is to say, are we meeting our timelines? The Planning Act can be quite complicated and specify a lot of things that happen in a certain order. And what we try to do, while we ensure that we meet all the timelines that we have, and again, that's to go along with program certainty for the people who want to invest in the community. Mike alluded to this previously in his presentation, but the planning department has an active role in affordable housing, supporting our partners. We did actually have a number of requests for funding, which were reviewed last year by the planning department, just to ensure that, you know, all the policies and regulations of our plans and zoning bylaws were being met. We have an active role in terms of liaison with our lower tier planning partners. We host a quarterly meeting, and that's where we bring forward emerging issues, as well as our observations about how do we make our collective efforts more streamlined, more efficient. Finally, one of the things that we're excited about implementing is really public engagement strategies that involve our First Nations partners. Matter of fact, we're about to issue our request for comment on an official plan amendment we just received, and that'll be the first opportunity for our Indigenous partners to participate in that. So I'm looking forward to some success there. Next slide, please. So again, on the plan review priorities, this is a continuance. Just to give you a bit of information on the official plan. So the county official plan was approved by the province in 2015. Why that's important is because now the Planning Act requires official plans to be updated every 10 years. It used to be 5, but they figured give us a little bit more time to implement plans. So now it's 10 years. So that would be when we would initiate a fulsome review of the county official plan. 3 of the 4 local official plans conform with the county official plan. And I just mentioned the 10-year review. One of the things that's come out of our development charges study is that our growth projections have been far exceeded. They were really casting out to another 10 years. And so for us to be on target, if you want to call it on target with our accelerated growth rate, we see that as one of the more significant things we need to tackle next year. And we were sort of on par to do about 1% growth, and we're over 2% now as it is. So that's an exciting thing if you're a planner, that you're growing as a community. Growth means investment, which is a great thing to help sustain the community and all the things that council want to do. So just noting the county population, this is based on the most recent census. So just over 20,000 persons. And then I've broken down the 4 municipalities as well. So next slide, please. Again, one of the things I mentioned is our ongoing floodplain mapping priority. So this is in response to some of the more significant weather events that the county's has experienced in the past. The project, most excitingly, has been partially funded through both federal and provincial means. And they always find ways of adding to the pot. So we just got wind that they're going to give us a bit more money to help finish the project. So that's exciting. We partner with the 2 conservation authorities. They have 2 distinct roles in this project. So the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, they're sort of the brains behind it. They're doing the actual modeling and assembling of data to actually produce floodplain, an actual model, and then floodplain mapping for us. And Kawartha Lakes is actually doing the field work. So they're going out and specifically surveying all of the structures, and that would be dams, bridges, and culverts up and down the reaches of the rivers to determine flood elevations, or at least structural elevations, so it can be modeled. And we're hoping that the field work will be finished sometime next year, and then we'll be able to finalize the model itself and then go to the public with our findings. So I'm hoping, depending on council's agenda in the next couple of months to have the conservation authorities come and actually do a soft launch of the floodplain mapping that they've been working on. So the big thing that we're, as I said, we're striving for is the public information centers in the municipalities. And why that's important, it's almost this exercise is almost treated like a class environmental assessment. So you actually have to present your findings to the public so they can be involved, ask questions, and maybe make suggestions, because the public, they're the ones who are having their properties flooded, and they can certainly add to the process. So that's a critical deliverable to happen next year. And we're hoping that we'll present the final report on this project to County Council early in 2024. And the reason why it's that date is because our funding has, the funding from the province has kind of said you have to have it all in play by April 1st of 2024. Next slide, please. So challenges for planning. And again, Mike has presented to you in the strategic priorities some of the challenges that the planning department will be assisting council in tackling. So rural transit was mentioned, shoreline preservation, lake health programming, development charges and the growth projections, short-term rentals. And the one thing that I did add is the recent bill, Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, that was issued by the province just this past fall. For the benefit of the county council, with this current provincial government, they have changed the Planning Act almost every year. And this was a really significant change with the emphasis of trying to, again, I mentioned the word program certainty or approval certainty, improving that for, Ontario's builders so that we can get more housing faster. So that act itself has some impact on how we process applications going forward. So for example, plans of subdivision require a public meeting. The previous council had one for Center Lake development, but going forward, it's not required under the Planning Act to have an open house or a public meeting for plans of subdivision. The other thing in this act that has impact on our development charges study is all of the changes that how you can charge for affordable housing units. So there'll be some sweeping changes that our consultant, when they come in January, can speak to. Other challenge, next slide, please. And just to build on what I was saying and what Mike presented this morning, we in the planning department are looking forward to county council's direction on special projects, the ones that are listed here on the slide, but also any new special projects that county council wants to task us with. So with that, I would just like the next slide, please. I'm available for questions. So thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Stone? Councillor Carter.
What about Bill 109? Does that have effect at your level also?
It does insofar as there's some nuances in the Planning Act and how we process applications, yes. Yeah.
And is it a challenge?
No, I often say to Mike that I'm internally optimistic, but naive. I always look at it as opportunities, right? I am a process efficiency freak. So I always look for changes that are coming down from the province as a means to really get at what we're really here to do, which is to provide good planning service. And so I look for opportunities to actually evaluate our programming so that we can deliver a product better, faster.
That is an internally optimistic approach. Good for you. Councillor Rael.
Steve, you were talking about the conservation authorities. And I noticed that you didn't mention Crow Valley. So consequently, I'm going to ask, are they involved with the project at all, or?
No.
In this particular case, they are not.
They are not. For the benefit of council, if I may, Warden, they are a small piece, Highlands East, and they assist your municipality with permit review as it relates to their regulated area. Part of Bill 23 actually is going to kind of upset that apple cart. I think you'll see a moving away from conservation authorities being involved in plan review. That's one thing that the new government wants to see happen.
Councillor Dayu.
This morning we had a starter conversation on the housing question. And climate change, of course, also falls within your department. And I recall from our community action plan and greenhouse gas emission report card that housing stock is the second highest emitter in Haliburton County, after transportation. Transportation is its own kettle of fish and might be difficult to tap into or reduce for this council. But I do look at our report card on housing stock and greenhouse gas emissions, and I think about affordable housing, and I don't have any ideas or answers, but I'm hoping that over the next year or two, or whenever it's appropriate, I wonder if we can somehow try to tie the link between the two, and knowing that getting your thermal envelope on your home contained costs more money, and therefore doesn't really help our affordable housing objectives. These two are still so incredibly important, and I wonder if there is a way that we would be able to tie them in productively instead of just conceptually. And I don't have any answers, but it's something that rolls around in my mind from time to time.
Is that a question?
Well, no, it's sort of planting a seed.
Sure.
So
sure.
if there's a way that in conversations about one, we can remember the other, so that we don't do parallel tracks.
For sure. Noted. Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Actually, 2 points. One to yours. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has just come up with a new funding program whereby on our municipal housing, we can do repairs to increase energy efficiency, and they'll pay 30%. So we're looking at KLHC, looking at trying to expand the definition of that and get more buildings covered, whether more insulation, better furnaces, that type of thing, which fits to your greenhouse gases. The other question was really a little bit from Councillor Rial's. Right now, your floodplain mapping was looking at the Gull and the Burnt River. So what percentage of the county has been done now, and what percentage is not really been covered? Because there is flooding in other areas, but.
Right. I would say from a watershed standpoint, you may be looking at 30% coverage. The two biggest systems, mind you, and why they were looked at is because they actually had the most development along their reaches, right? So.
Councillor Fury.
I think I heard you say you're inviting groups in to review official plan amendments. And what happens if they disagree with you? What are you going to do then?
Well, ultimately, we would assemble all the comments that we have and then present those comments for the consideration of county council and provide you with the best advice there. One of the things that we do try to do, and I've been quite successful over my career, is if there's an issue that arises, I look to the development team and say, here's an opportunity for you to bring the issues, to find solutions for that. And ultimately, I mean, you look at case in point would be no appeals this year with 50 consent applications. We bring parties together to work on solutions, and that usually bears out in changes to plans. additional conditions and ultimately approvals by either committee or council.
Does that answer your question? But he's optimistic. You did hear that. One question that I had for you, Steve, was I'd heard that the province is going to be updating or changing the provincial policy statement, and that is going to delay updating of our OPs. Is there a time frame that you can put to that?
I can't put a time frame. I can tell you that it's breakneck speed that the province is acting on. I would expect that they would start consultation in the spring on a new provincial policy statement. So I would be surprised if we don't have a new PPS. They like dramatic dates. So I would say 23, by the end of 23, they'll have something for us to consider.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Stone? Well, thank you, sir. We look forward to hearing a lot more from you next year. Next up is economic development. Good afternoon, Scott.
There we go. So for those of you that I haven't formally introduced myself, I'm Scott Olva. I'm Director of Economic Development. I've been with the county now just over a year. And I'm just here today to talk to you about the Economic Development and Tourism Department that was recently merged in November of 2021. Provide you with an overview of our departmental priorities, as well as some of the challenges that we're facing moving forward. Next slide, please, Mark. So it's important to note here on this slide that the department as it's currently presented has only actually been in place with the people in those roles for less than a year. So Tracy Bertrand, the manager of tourism, joined us in January of 2022. Eric Casper is our tourism coordinator. And then we do have a part-time position, Tom Lambert, who's our food and tourism facilitator. We're just in the process of working with our HR department to tweak that role a bit. We do want to note there'll be no budget impacts for that as well. Andrea. Next slide, please, Mark. So it was really important from my point of view when we first started with Tracy and myself in January, we had a new team. So we created a mission statement. And by no means is this a formal mission statement. We just felt that this was a great way to bring our new team together, give us a kind of a North Star and a guiding philosophy as we evaluate decisions. So our mission statement is to create an environment conducive to responsible internal and external investment in the business community in the County of Haliburton. And then economic development, we just wanted to give you an overview just because it is a new role for the county. I believe it's been about just over 5 years before we've had a function. We've broken it out into departmental pillars. Depending on the municipality that you look at, these might be worded different, but kind of fundamentally, they're all the same. So we have business retention and expansion. That's really just about getting out there, meeting and engaging with our business community. This year, we began the process of doing an annual business survey. Our hope is that we can establish a baseline of data through that process so we can evaluate our programs and our impact on the business community, allow us to make informed decisions as we move forward. Our second pillar, and I'll note too, these are in by no means in kind of any particular order, are entrepreneurial and business support. And how we would frame that is that's about a lot of business owners or managers. They work for the business a lot of times, they don't work on the business. So this is trying to provide opportunities for business owners to get additional training and grow their skill set. A good example of this is last year, we worked with HCDC and the Chamber of Commerce and provided business training courses. They ranged from digital marketing to how to operate QuickBooks. And it was really just basic fundamental opportunities for them to get together and kind of grow their skill set and engage with each other. The third priority, I think you've probably heard a lot about this on the campaign trail. It's workforce development enhancement. We know that there's a lot of layers of government that are going to have to work together and solve this. And this is really about working with our provincial partners, our partners in the education system, finding ways for our businesses to attract, and I think most importantly as well, retain employees. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly to us, both Tracy and I, is partnership development. We understand a lot of the issues and challenges we're facing in the world of economic development. We're not going to be able to solve on our own. We have to maintain positive relationships with all our levels of government. And I think secondly as well, what we identify, we're not a big department. We're a department of 2.5, basically 3.5. So for us to be successful, we have to work with our local stakeholders. So it's really important for us to develop positive working relationships with HGDC, the Chamber of Commerce. It's not always going to be the county delivering a service or a program. It might be those institutions or organizations. And it's really about us working with them and ultimately trying to achieve our goals. So moving forward, our areas of focus. Obviously, we've talked about it earlier today. Mr. Rutter outlined it's about the completion of and implementation of our economic development strategy. We're hoping to have that to you early in the new year. We retained a consultant to complete that project. What we realized over the summer was that project was going to straddle 2 terms of council. So what we did is slowed down the data gathering phase, and that took place over the fall. So we've done surveys. I think we had roughly about 475 responses to our surveys. We've done breakout roundtable discussions, one-on-one interviews, and I'll again just urge you to check your spam folders to see if those interview requests have come through. That process is just completing right now. And then early in the new year, our firm will present to you just kind of the initial situational analysis, the information that they've received, as well as kind of the preliminary direction they're thinking of going. Subsequently, we're hoping in early March, they'll present to you a draft for your input. And then hopefully based on your input and feedback, we'll present a final draft early in November or early in April. Again, providing you one final opportunity to make any tweaks or suggestions to the final product. We're also just in the process of developing an economic development web presence for the county. We brought forward a report about that this morning. As part of the economic development strategy as well, we are going to establish KPIs. We recognize as a new role, a new function for the county, it's really important for us to establish ways and identify ways that we can measure impact on the business community within the county and really be able to measure and report back to council on the impacts we're having. We're also going to continue to develop and enhance our relationships with the townships. So last year we presented all the townships in the fall of 2022. Moving forward, what we would like to do is present twice a year. So we're looking at presenting in the spring of 2023, presenting an operational plan that obviously would come to county council before that. And then we'd like to present to those townships in the fall. What that's doing is just identifying what our plan is, what we completed, what our successes, what our failures were, as well as giving the townships an opportunity to provide us any input on what they would like us to focus on moving forward. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is just to continue grow and enhance our relationship with the business community. Next slide, Mark. So challenges. I think a lot of these can kind of be grouped into one bucket, but similar to Steve, I would actually view these as some of these as opportunities. So we view an opportunity as given that the county still is new in our role in economic development, is really about establishing our presence, making people aware that we're here to provide a service. We're here to help them. We focus on being solution-based, not problem-based. We act almost as a concierge service. So we work with businesses prior to them even sometimes going to a planning department, just giving them kind of a, sometimes just layman's terms on what they're dealing with. And then obviously we have workforce development and attraction. We've talked a lot about that. Transportation's been identified in almost all of our strategies. Do look forward to working with Steve and bringing something back in February, hopefully of next year, to present some options to council. Housing availability, obviously, for employees, that's a real challenge, particularly in the tourism industry right now. A lot of the businesses, when you're hiring seasonal employees, it becomes really challenging if they don't have housing to get those people into the workforce. And broadband connectivity. Now, I think if you really look at those three, transportation, housing, and broadband connectivity, we realize that there's a lot of different players involved in solving those problems, and that we're one component of that. We're not going to be probably the driving force behind it. We're going to be contributing to the solution. One challenge we did identify early on, and we're hoping to rectify, and again, we view this as an opportunity, is a lot of the provincial services when it comes to business development, workforce development, they're actually located in Peterborough and Kawartha Lakes. So During the pandemic, that was all right when everyone was looking at doing things digitally. As we're kind of exiting that and people are looking to re-engage with each other and people are looking for that more one-on-one person-to-person contact, that becomes a challenge getting down there. So we're working with HCDC. They have their hub location that they're looking at expanding. And what we're trying to do is get some of those services up here, even if it's 1 day a week. People then recognize that those services are here and they can access them. We're trying to find mechanisms for that. Ultimately, it's about promoting what they provide as well. The seasonality of the local economy, particularly in the tourism sector. And then lastly, we're still exiting COVID-19. We're not even exiting, we still in COVID-19, it's the recovery. And then secondarily, we're kind of entering the possibility of a recession. When we see the interest rate hikes recently, that prevents challenges if you're a business and you're looking to invest or grow your business, and might make you think twice about trying to borrow money. Next slide, please, Mark. So our priorities in the tourism department obviously are the implementation of the 5-year destination management plan. But as part of that, Tracy Bertrand comes from a strong tourism background, but as part of the organization she was, or the organization she was part of, had a very strong link and synergy with economic development. So what we focused on as well is trying to make our tourism department not solely be viewed as a marketing department, as being a tourism and economic development department. We're one and the same. We recognize tourism is one of our primary economic drivers, and we have to do more than just market to help those businesses. The plan does contain 3 strategic priorities. They're strengthen community collaboration, diversify destination development, and enhance the destination brand. I'm not going to walk you through the whole document. I would encourage you, when you're doing your Christmas reading that Mr. Rutter has assigned to you, if you have time, you can review that document. One thing I do want to stress with, though, it's been about a focus for Tracy and I, is to ensure that the document just doesn't sit on the shelf and collect dust. When we bring a report forward to council, we're linking what we're doing to an objective or a tactic that's in that plan. We'll be taking the same approach with the economic development strategy. If we're bringing forward operational plans for council's consideration, we're linking what we're doing in tourism to that document to ensure it maintains its relevancy. Next slide, please, Mark. And then as part of focusing more on tourism development and not just tourism marketing, we're really focused again on stakeholder engagement. Tracy, probably for the first 6 months of her job, was on Zoom a lot with businesses, and then was on the road making site visits and conducting site visits with businesses. The county, outside of Hike Halliburton, we don't focus on creating our own products or events, and we're okay with that. They can come very time consuming from an HR standpoint. We're focused on trying to work with our stakeholders and help them build their businesses and leverage what they're already doing and marketing those existing products. And then just a quick plug here too. Tracy's just going through the process of her resident sentiment survey. And that's really trying to link what our residents, their perceptions and how they feel about tourism growth and development, to what we're doing in tourism. That'll be an annual initiative. We're lucky enough to receive some funding from OTO to do that. However, we have the tools now to move forward, do that in-house. And I think, again, that links back to some of the conversations we heard this morning about the environment and why people come here. We want to ensure that that's maintained. Next slide, please, Mark. And then, as mentioned in the previous slide, we do operate Hike Halliburton. So we returned, we didn't operate an event in the winter of 2022 just due to COVID-19 restrictions. We brought back the event in the fall of this year, and then we'll be running the event on February 3rd and 4th of February of 2023. We've seen increased participation in the event every year, which is great. Moving forward, what we really want to try and do is actually increase the partnerships that we have and increase visitor spending. By all means, it's fantastic that people are coming to Halliburton to take part in a hike. However, we want them coming here and take part in that hike and spend money at a store, or stay overnight and go to a restaurant. Tracy and the team have done a really good job of trying to work with some of our local operators and hotels and resorts, trying to link and create packages. This year, I think we did see some fruits from our labor. We saw the highest percentage of participants from the GTA, and that's where we're really trying to market to. So that's great to see. And we hope to see that continue. Next slide, please, Mark. And then just our priorities from a destination marketing standpoint, it's really about content development and creating content and creating a narrative around Haliburton County. We work really hard to grow and engage with our tourism stakeholders on getting them to give us their products, their services, and marketing and promoting those through our digital channels. Obviously, we want to work with them to develop a little, more niche products that become more unique that we can really kind of hang our hat on. And then ultimately trying to work with them to help combat the seasonality of the tourism economy in the area and lengthen those shoulder seasons so that we have, the peaks and the valleys are closer together. Next slide, please, Mark. So the destination vision for Haliburton County is where residents and visitors celebrate the essence of Canada's outdoor and creative spirit. We recognize kind of from a messaging standpoint, there's a lot of communities right now that are kind of playing up the "we're not Toronto, come visit us." So this year's been really about trying to figure out, how do we separate ourselves even from those destinations and elevate ourselves from those noise or above that noise, recognizing we have an asset just around the corner from us in Algonquin Park. So we've been utilizing that as an excellent opportunity to try and capture some of that traffic. And then working with, again, our local tourism operators to try and create signature experiences that people are coming here for that they can only get in Haliburton County and take advantage of those. And again, trying to work with them and really market that we're not quite as far from the GTA as some people think we might be. Next slide, please, Mark. And then lastly, just our challenges. So from a tourism standpoint, we recognize that it is a seasonal economy. We have a large variance between our busy season or seasons of high demand and our shoulder seasons where there's not as many visitors around. Now, some of our operators are okay with that. It gives them an opportunity to take a breather and take some much needed vacation. And I think it was touched on this morning. One of the biggest challenges we face, and it's an interesting juxtaposition that we're in, is that a lot of the reason that people come here is because of our pristine natural environment. And how do we manage the demands that are being placed on our environment through increased visitation responsibly? So we have to be very cognizant of how we're marketing and how we're promoting Haliburton County and kind of the growth and investment we're trying to encourage, both from a tourism and economic development standpoint. That's a challenge we've listed on tourism, but it's something that we wrestle with in the economic development space as well. We've touched on the availability of housing for seasonal or the service-based workforce. It becomes, as we know, it really challenging for anybody to recruit somebody right now. So if you're looking for a part-time position or a seasonal position, that becomes even more difficult. And then lastly, I think something that Tracy and I've really focused on is just identifying that there's more to tourism in Haliburton County than coming and sitting on a dock. It's one of our primary economic drivers. It's an opportunity for people to build a career, build a life, and kind of positively contribute to the county. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions.
Questions or comments for Scott? Councillor Carter.
I note that you do not mention a municipal accommodation tax. I'll tell you up front, and I'm all for collecting taxes from people who don't live here to help our economy. So, I mean, is this something that you feel is worthwhile? And it would seem to me that from what designated uses of such a tax dollars can be, it could be helpful to us.
Yeah, I went through implementing one of these in a previous position, and I almost shudder when the term comes up. But by all means, I think it's an excellent opportunity to generate an additional revenue source for the not only the county, the townships. The fact that it could be redirected to not only tourism but economic development issues. I know that would probably be music to some councillors' ears at budget time, having a revenue source to kind of redirect revenue to. We're obviously open. I have experience already implementing one, so it would really, I think it would come down to what council wants to do. If they want to do that, I think it would make sense to link it to the implementation of the short-term rental bylaw. I know there's a lot of noise out there that it has a negative effect, and you know, I can speak from a previous experience where my business card was at every hotel in the town that I was working in. If people had complaints, and I heard from 4 or 5 people. So yeah, it's an excellent opportunity if it needs to be explored. We have it, you know, Tracy and I both have a lot of experience in that space. Again, as Councilor Mr. Rudder identified this morning, it would really just come down to council direction. I hope that answered your question.
The last time that a mat tax was discussed here at this in this room, it was not well received at all by the stakeholders, probably because of the impact it had on them. But it wasn't well received. But you know, I see it. I'm not sure whether it would conflict with the work that we're doing on short-term rentals, or you know, they would work well combining the two of them together. I'm not sure. I just sort of see it as a bit of a double whammy. If you're putting in a short-term rental policy and bylaw that's going to have a financial impact on people, to do a mat tax at the same time might be a hard sell, but I don't know that for sure. Go ahead, Scott.
And if I may, through you, Warden, I think probably too, it's important to note, I think particularly if council were to ever explore it with our traditional accommodations, I think a lot of our traditional accommodations have people that come and stay longer than a night. People are, you know, here for 3 or 4 days. So a 4% tax might impact that more dramatically in that space. However, in the short-term rental area, if it was just applied to that, you know, if a program's implemented, we probably do need to identify revenue sources even just to pay for the program, and that might make sense in that case.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I guess, you know, when I see the prices that on these Airbnbs, and you know, I don't think that 4% is going to make much of a difference to most people. And again, it's not affecting local folks. This is people who are coming from out of town, and the ability to use that money that is gained from that, it will pays for your hike Halliburton and pays for your signage, and it also can be used for housing, and which is another one of your issues.
Absolutely. And you know, in my past experience, it was the biggest hurdle was explaining to hosts that the tax is ultimately passed on to the guest. It's not coming out of their bottom line if they choose to operate it that way. But again, that really is all about communication. You know, it was touched on this morning with the short-term rental bylaw. It's really about making sure people understand what the facts are. And I think probably being really and very clear and open and transparent about where the money is being allocated, and those are all achievable goals if directed to do so.
Any other questions or comments for Scott? From my own purposes, I just wonder, I know you mentioned working with municipalities, and I wonder what your plan is, you know, going forward. What a percentage of your time, or how much effort you would put into working with municipalities to talk about their specific business development goals or ideas that they've got for growth.
I don't know if I'd put a number on it. I don't know, Mr. Rudder might disagree with me, but Tracy and I really view ourselves, we're a service to the business community and the townships. I think there is a reason that council chose to make the investment they did at the county level. I was brought up, it might have been at your council, about when we do present to some of the townships, if doing it at budget time, that helps kind of kickstart some discussions. But obviously we'll probably bring our operational plan forward in February, and then start kind of doing our traveling roadshow in March about what our priorities are. And we're open, and maybe sometimes that's to our own detriment. We maybe take a bit too much on, but we're here to help. We're a service. And again, it's about providing value for the investment that's been made in us.
The other comment that I wanted to make, and this is a bit of a, I don't want to call it fluff, but it's something that's not absolutely necessary, but to me, when, you know, we're promoting Halliburton County as a destination, our county signs when you're entering the county, as far as I'm concerned, they're not worth having, to put it quite bluntly. And I see that there's some very innovative work that can be done, you know, as entryways into a county area that don't necessarily have to cost a fortune. I know some of them are very expensive that have been done, but I really would like us to sort of as a side issue to look and think about that and what we can do, how creative we can be, what funding there might be for something like that.
Yeah, I think we could, if we get approval through the budget cycle to go down the road of the wayfinding, I think we could easily build that into and not about where the sign would physically go, just probably getting some kind of design help on what they could look like. We've been have heard some rumors about some funding coming out in the new year that we perhaps could look at. And when it comes out, we can evaluate how applicable it is, but we're, you know, absolutely open to that, and we could easily build that into a scope of work.
Don't get me wrong, I very much like the My Halliburton Highlands tagline. And I like the, you know, the way the designs that have been done for that, but as far as it being used for entry signs into the county, I mean, I would like to blame the MTO for that. It just didn't work out well, and I would like to see something something a little bit more, I don't know, classy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because something works on a website or in a digital space doesn't mean it's going to work on a physical sign. And you know, we're happy to explore that in more detail.
Right on. Thanks. Councillor Rail.
Warden Danielson brought up a good question, and I'm wondering, you go down the 401, you see all kinds of these elaborate things and various other highways. And yet we find ourselves in a position where the MTO kind of sort of, I don't know what they do, but they seem to want us to be somewhere else except where we are. Do you foresee that being an issue, or do you see anything in the pipeline that says they might loosen up a little bit on rural Ontario to show a little creativity? No, so that we can show a little creativity in what we have.
I know the MTO, like to call them the MT no sometimes. So I think it would just be in conversations with them. It's been a while since I've dealt with them on signage issues, and we would have to chat with them about what that looks like. I don't even really know what has to take place if you were to kind of change a gateway sign. It would have to be, you know, do some research there. A lot of it I found with, and I'm sure we all have experience in those government agencies, is just finding who kind of the go-to person is within that given ministry, and then just kind of dealing directly with them throughout the process. So we can put that on our to-do list in the new year.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. And last but not least, we have the Halliburton County Paramedic Service.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure if it's best to go last or last, but we'll see. We'll see when we're done here.
Your last but not least, believe me, we've got paramedic services on the mind today.
Well, that's good. That's good news. Good afternoon, Warden, members of council, and new members of council, and those returning. My name's Tim Waite. I'm the Chief and Director of Emergency Services for Halliburton County. And just to give you a little bit of background of myself, I started, and I don't want to age myself here. I've been in paramedicine almost 40 years. That's because I started when I was 6 years old. And I started inland when I was in high school. I moved to Royal Victoria Hospital in '95 to oversee the base hospital program, which provides quality insurance and training for Simcoe County and Muskoka. While I was there, I went back to school at the same time, got my advanced care flight ticket. So in my spare time, I would service Northern Ontario. I flew out of Thunder Bay into all the northern areas to provide patient care. And then I came back to Muskoka management for a while, and then I came over here December 5th, 2016. and this is where I plan to stay. So anyway, welcome to Emergency Services. So as you can see, I had to make everything fit on the page. We have myself and I have two deputy chiefs, Jim Young and our newest deputy chief, David Dasty. We have a coordinator of for community paramedicine. We have four full-time community paramedics. And then we have anywhere from 20, we have about 28 full-time staff, and it fluctuates as far as the number of part-time staff go, but hovers around 28. And just to note, David Dasty, our new deputy chief, precepted me when I was doing my advanced care flight training out at Timmins. So it was nice to see him again after all these years. Next slide, please. So for our staffing, we have Halliburton has one 24-hour ambulance, and we have one 12-hour ambulance. And it's an 11 to 11 shift. When it's in, if it's in the area, it services Algonquin Highlands. We station it over there. Minden Base has one 24-hour ambulance, and Tory Hill now has one 24-hour ambulance. Next slide, please. So the shift schedules in Minden are 8 to 8. So 8 in the morning till 8 p.m. And then the night crew comes on at 8 p.m. till 8 in the morning. Tory Hill is 24 hours as well, and it's a 7 to 7 shift. And the 12-hour ambulance in Halliburton is 11 to 11 p.m. For emergency, to meet our response time criteria and to meet the ministry guidelines, we have to provide a report. We have to have a report prepared by October 1st every year of our response times targets. And then I have to supply them with that before October 31st. They've gone unchanged for as long as I've been here, but so sudden cardiac arrest, the ministry sets the time criteria of we have to be there in 6 minutes, but we have the option to say what percentage of the time can we make it in 6 minutes. And with a geography of 4,700 square kilometers, to get there in 6 minutes, a lot of time it's difficult. So that is one response time that often I watch them throughout the year. I will see it creep down below our 20%. Then it usually creeps back up because it's such a small volume of calls. One call can change it here and there. CTAS 1s, and again, these are based on the Canadian Triage Acuity Scale. And I've listed sort of just below that what a CTAS 1 would entail, and that would be an unconscious patient. Again, here, the ministry sets the guideline of 8 minutes. We are allowed to set the percentage of time that we get there in 8 minutes. CTAS 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're allowed to set the time it takes us to get there and the percentage of time it takes us to, and the percentage of times we're successful meeting that time criteria. So I will present, I usually have a really nice little picture to go with this, but you may not be aware, but where I get this data from, they got hacked about 3 weeks ago and completely shut the systems down because there's patient information involved in that data. So I wasn't able to give you an updated picture, but I will in the future.
Can I just clarify?
Yes.
There was an unauthorized attempt to access the system, which was caught.
Yes.
They
Yes.
weren't necessarily hacked. They shut the system down, but there's no evidence, at least that I'm aware of, that there was any access to personal information or anything else.
No, and that's true. Yeah, they've done all the digging into it. They've rebuilt servers. It's just been down for a long time. So access to some of the data wasn't available. But I will bring this periodically to you, what our response times are throughout the year. We are allowed to change them throughout the year if we want, if we find we're not meeting one, or but it comes with a nice little picture and a graph. So it just keeps you updated on what our response times are and how we're doing out there. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example, when I started in ambulance, we weren't able to do any of this stuff. So that's how much it's evolved. We have quite a few medications that we now administer. We are in a sort of a pilot project with the palliative care program. And in that includes 3 additional medications, being the glycopyrrolate, ondansetron, and haloperidol. and try and say that 3 times real fast. They're going to include the ondansetron also in the regular medications of the frontline paramedics coming February. And they're also including oxytocin, which is used in emergency childbirth, and dexamethasone for the kiddies with croup. Next slide, please. And their skill set has evolved tremendously. And again, when I started in ambulance, we couldn't do any of those skills. So the paramedic skill set has grown tremendously. And that's why the college program went from 1 year to 2 year, and now they're looking at a 3-year program. They were looking at a 4-year program, but I think they realized that if they go 4 years, that's 2 years with no graduates, and we're having enough trouble staffing. People are having enough trouble staffing now. So that's one, I think, why they're just going in on it gently to make it a 3-year program, because there is a whole new skill set out there, and it takes a lot longer to learn it and to become comfortable with it. Next slide, please. Just to give you an example of what we've experienced in the last 3 years as far as call volume growth. For the first 3 years I was here, it was kind of flat. I mean, our call volumes may be a few % increase each year. But what I want you to really look at in this slide is the light blue colors. And those are the ones that we were actually carrying patients, and we have patient contact. So in 2020, we had an increase of 8%. In 2021, 18.8%. So we're looking at like 27% increase in call volumes just in the last 2 years. And if we just go to the next slide, please. You can see that as of October 31st of this year, we were up another 12.7% compared to last year. So we are seeing unprecedented call volume increases. The dark blue in the previous slide, that just includes standbys, because as you heard this morning, sometimes, and I'll show you in another slide, when one ambulance moves, sometimes we bring another ambulance in for the coverage, which we call a standby. So one call can generate more than one call because it creates standbys. Next slide, please. We also, our department looks after the emergency management. So it acts as a support for the local municipalities in the case of emergency. In very specific circumstances, the county would act as the lead. This year, a 2022 mandatory training and exercise was completed by the emergency management group and as the facilitator, and I submitted our compliance reports in November. We should get a letter saying we were compliant sometime in July or August. Next slide, please. We also have a fairly robust public access defibrillation program. We have 39 public access devices throughout the county in public buildings. We purchased 3 additional units in 2018 for the Public Works Department for their supervisor vehicles. And in the budget is included $10,000 annually for replacement of pad devices. So we initiated a program of replacing the aging devices a few years ago. In 2022, we replaced 8 more. So challenges. I think these are sort of our top 3 supply chain issues. And with that, I can give you an example. We order an ambulance every year, and every 6 years we order 2. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So we used to put our order for an ambulance in by November because we could get a 2% saving in the fabrication costs in the new year. And we'd receive that new ambulance by April or May. I ordered our 2 new ambulances in the fall of 2021 and expecting we hopefully get them by the spring of 2022. And we are not expecting them now till probably March or April 2023, which becomes an issue because now we're really running these trucks beyond the kilometers that we like to change them out at, which is about 300,000 kilometers. So that increases maintenance costs. It's just overall, it's just snowballs into a lot of extra costs. Fuel costs. They've been unpredictable lately, but they're a challenge because doing a lot of out-of-town transfers, that uses a lot of fuel. Out-of-town transfers are a challenge. And I have this little graph at the bottom, just to give you an example of the increased number of transfers over the last few years. And you can see that they've risen quite dramatic, like quite a lot. And even at the end of October, we're up to 730 for this year. So I expect we're going to be well over 800 transfers, which gives me that sort of, thought that, yes, we need a CT scan because close to half of those transfers are for diagnostics, therefore a CT scan. To take them down, have a CT scan, find out there's nothing wrong and bring it back. Sometimes there's something wrong. But again, I've only included the destination for transfers as Ross Memorial and Peterborough, because that's our major centers we go to. But we still take patients to Toronto. We take them over to Muskoka, to the surgeon there. We often go up to Huntsville as well. So that's not the total number of transfers we do, but that's just the main ones we do that include the majority of the CAT scans. So our capital purchasing, we purchase as I said, a new ambulance annually, with 2 ambulances purchased every 6 years, which was 2022, which we're not going to get now till 2023. And we'll have to get an order in for a new ambulance very soon to hopefully get it by 2025. And next slide, please. Ambulance deployment. This is where we get to have some fun. Okay, next slide, please. So as I was describing earlier about and when one ambulance moves, it can create 2 calls. It could even create 3 calls in some circumstances. But at peak deployment, if we have all our ambulances in the county, we have 1 at the Minden base, we have 1 at Haliburton, 1 in Tory Hill, and then we have the standby over in Carnarvon. And they often will be at the Stanhope Fire Hall. Sometimes they will roam in the area. But if we have 1 ambulance get a call, next slide or click, please. So if Minden gets a call, and that could be a local call or it could be a transfer out of town, then click, please. We'll move that truck from Algonquin Highlands down to Minden. And the purpose of moving them and deploying them around like this is we keep the cars in where we think the next call might happen. And that's going to be the most populated area. So then if we have another truck on that day go on a transfer or a call, then we will, and click again, then we will move the Tory Hill truck into Haliburton, and that remains the 2 trucks in the most populated areas. If another call goes out, if a third call go out, then we would keep the 1 truck in Haliburton as it's the most populated area. Next slide, please. So on night shift, we're down to 3 trucks, 3 staffed ambulances. So if we get a call in this case, just to as an example, if Minden goes out, and then we click, then we would move Haliburton to Minden and click again, and Tory Hill into Haliburton. So in that case, we created 3 calls out of 1. So that's where you get those additional calls. Next slide, please. Sort of our newest initiative and program, which began in 2017, was the Community Paramedic Program. And the community paramedics, we receive referrals through many community partners, including primary care providers, the hospital discharge planners, home and community care, Triple HS, the GAIN program, and even our 911 paramedics can create a referral if they go to a residence and they see a need for some enhanced, not necessarily taking them to the hospital, but they obviously see a need for the person to be seen on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So at any one time, we have approximately 125 to 135 clients rostered in the community paramedic program. So on a typical visit, the community paramedic, they'll perform a full set of vitals. They'll even check the patient's weights, glucose levels if needed. We'll often do a home and safety inspection while they're there to identify any trip hazards. They'll ensure that their medications are up to date and that they're taking them appropriately. And every call there's a special electronic form completed for them. And again, if they note that there's maybe a food deficiency or in nutritional issues, they'll contact. We actually have meals that we can take to them which have been provided by Search, but we'll also contact Meals on Wheels. And again, this is all done with the permission of the patient. We just don't go barging into houses and do this stuff. We have the permission of the patients or the family members that have requested us to do this. Next slide, please. If the community paramedic finds some concerns, and this happens on occasion, they may call 911 because they recognize this patient needs hospital care at this time. Sometimes they'll just contact the primary care provider for some guidance, what they should do. Maybe the patient's very confused and the primary care provider will say, can you get a urine sample for me? We'll see if there's maybe a bladder infection. And again, there could be often referrals to Meals on Wheels, brokered workers. We get volunteer drivers to allow patients to stay safely at home. And we often do referrals to the GAIN, which is a geriatric assessment and intervention network, home and community care, the mobile mental health clinic, or housing crisis support is appropriate. And we've called the heat bank on occasion for some individuals. Next slide, please. So this is an example of just this year's, how many visits we're doing in the home. As you can see, they range from the low 300s to over 400 per month. So we have a fair amount of visits taking place. Next slide. One thing that community paramedicine, I think the provincial government really saw this, that how nimble paramedicine is. We really stepped up when the vaccines came out, especially for the inbound patients. We were able to, get the medical directive from our medical director of health, get the vaccine. We're prioritized to get it and deliver it to those individuals in the home that couldn't get out and get the vaccine on their own. So, and that continues on to this day. We're still giving vaccines in the home for COVID. Next slide, please. And this is just an example. I think that it shows the success of the community paramedic program. We often get cards of thanks delivered to us for the community paramedic program, just because people just like to see them there. They feel comfortable having them come there, and it's just nice to get these. And I thought I'd just put that in there just to show you that I think the people in the community do appreciate the program. Next slide, please. So going forward, we are looking at the program expanding as far as the care we can provide in the home. That includes IV antibiotics, certain blood testing, and urinalysis in the home. And we're actually just purchased some of the equipment. We can have a lab that actually goes to the house and we can take the blood sample and it does the lab work on site. So then we can provide that to the primary care physician and they can use that information, to the patient's advantage. Remote patient monitoring, that will allow us for specific patients to, we can monitor them on a regular basis without even visiting their home. So we have the equipment for that now. It's just, you have to have the right patient because they have to be cognitive enough to be able to take, put the blood pressure cuff on themselves and take their temperature and get on the scale. And so it's specific to some patients, but it's a great tool. So you can monitor these patients on a regular basis. And it might be patients that's just discharged from the hospital. And the physician wants to keep an eye on them for a couple of weeks while they adjust their medications or something. And the palliative treat and refer that I talked to a while ago it sort of falls into with the community paramedics, but it's also all our frontline paramedics are trained to do it. And that's for patients to stay at home. And those are patients that have gone home to die. And we've had a couple in the area that we've responded to. They're a different call for us because it's not a case of we're transporting this patient to the hospital. We're helping them to stay at home where they want to be. So it's not only in the community paramedic side, we're using it in the 911 side as well. Next slide. And that's emergency services. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Tim? Councillor Carter and Councillor Dayu.
Just not sure if you're using it for planning purposes, but the number of transports, I would say that your number of transports this year are actually artificially low because when we had a situation where Ross was closed for a while, so they weren't accepting diagnostic patients, and many specialists around the area have had to cancel surgeries and other various things just because they can't accept more patients. So if, you know, my wife had to do an emergency referral and, you know, they said they could see them in April. You know, so it's, you know, that's delaying your workload, which would have been much higher than it.
I see what you're saying, yes, because, yeah, there would have been more transferred had they been able to perform procedures, yes.
Mr. Dayu?
I see, given our demographics in the county, that the community paramedic services is a real growth market. I could see that really being a desired service in the future and something to think about. My question, however, is with regards to Algonquin Highlands, Dorset, and northwards, Oxtown Lake. Is there a transfer system, a payment transfer system, say between Halliburton and Huntsville, so that any ambulance services that are covered for our group up there by Huntsville is paid by Algonquin Highlands taxpayers via Halliburton, or how does that work?
The term I think is called cross-border billing. And you have to have an agreement in place to cross-border bill. We do have an agreement in place with, and Andrew, you might be able to help me better, but I think Kawartha Lakes, Hastings, Peterborough, but we do not have one with Muskoka. So if Muskoka does a call in Halliburton County, they don't bill us for it.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. There was talk of it when I was in Muskoka, and I said, I wouldn't poke that skunk. So they've never billed for it.
Were you referring to anyone in particular?
In particular, so that can be a conversation that you can continue to have.
That's right, yes.
Any other questions for Chief Wade? Thanks so much, Tim. Much appreciated. So that concludes the orientation for today. And we're just operating right on time. Next on the agenda are bylaws. So the first is the appointment of members to committees and liaisons. So if I could have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Burton and Carter.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that bylaw 4138, being a bylaw to repeal and replace bylaw 4082, respecting the appointment of members of council and public representatives of the Corporation of the County of Halliburton, to appoint a council liaison to various county departments, and to appoint members of council as representatives of the Corporation of the County of Halliburton to external boards and organizations, to be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And the next is to appoint the Integrity Commissioner, I think effective January the 1st.
Yes.
Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ferry, seconded by Councillor McKechnie.
Moved by Councillor Ferry, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that bylaw 4139, being a bylaw to appoint an Integrity Commissioner and to authorize the warden and clerk to sign an agreement for Integrity Commissioner services for the County of Halliburton, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of motions? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the confirming bylaw? Councillor Royale, Councillor Shell.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that bylaw 4140, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the December 14th, 2022 meeting of Halliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And before we adjourn, I'd just like to thank all of staff for your presentations today, for your hard work and your patience today. A long day for us all. And to wish everyone in the room a very happy holiday season, Merry Christmas, and all the best in the new year. We've got lots of work ahead of us next year. So having said that, could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Councillor McKechnie, would you like to take on that role? Thank you. Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Royal.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that the December 14th, 2022 meeting of Halliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried.